Hello, 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 and we are live. Welcome to the Katie Halper Show. We are doing a special early for the East Coast stream, even earlier for the West Coast, but sensible time for the Middle East Coast. I don't know, whatever, for the Middle East. You probably know I'm Katie Halper. Very excited to have joining us once again Youmna Patel, who is based in Bethlehem. She is a reporter with from Weiss. She covers the conflict there. She lives in Bethlehem. She's going to talk to us more about what she's been seeing. And then we're going to have, after that part of the chat, which is going to be kind of like an update on the ceasefire, we're going to be joined by Jeff Halper, no relation. Jeff Halper, who is from the International Coalition Against Housing Demolition. I never realized that rhymed, actually. And he's going to talk to us about the one-state solution, which is something he works on and has been working on for a while. And we're going to talk about how that possibility looks now, if it's changed. You know what, by the way? It's Israeli Committee Against Housing Demolitions, which is why I never realized before that it rhymes, because it actually doesn't rhyme. So I just want to be a responsible journalist and, in full transparency, admit that I made that mistake. So it's the International... because I definitely would have noticed that before, obviously. It's the International Committee Against Housing Coalitions. And Jeff has had interesting things happen to him, like he's been arrested for having BDS materials, for being in possession of BDS materials. But let's get back to Youmna, who we're very excited to have on. Tell us, please, you yourself, I don't know, have you been arrested? You've been tear gassed. Do you have any footage of that? I should show people this. But you've been tear gassed, and you've been also restricted very recently. So tell us about what you've undergone, and then we'll talk about the actual stuff you're observing. But first of all, let's be meta. This was like the longest meta intro ever. Anyway, take it away, Youmna.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been arrested by Israeli forces. I have, most recently, I guess my Twitter was restricted, so that happened. I got a video taken down on TikTok. A video that it was a really quick clip. It went kind of viral on Twitter and Instagram when I was just asking a Palestinian teenager sort of what her message was to the world, and she sort of kind of broke down in that video and was imploring people to stand up for Gaza and for Sheikh Jarrah and for Palestine. And I guess that doesn't follow TikTok's community guidelines. It said it was taken down for violating guidelines on dangerous individuals or organizations. I mean, I'm just assuming some people probably reported it because they didn't like seeing Palestinians, I don't know, asking for freedom, I guess, on their page. So yeah, I mean, it just obviously as a result of the work of reporting in the West Bank and covering a lot of protests, you just by default sort of come under fire from tear gas and other crowd dispersal measures. So that's just, I guess, a reality of covering the issues here.
Yeah, and let me show that video. So this is still on Twitter, but it's been taken down by TikTok. Correct? Okay, so let's go to this video. And you filmed this. When was this filmed? What day in the Sheikh Jarrah?
This was filmed. I can just give me 1 second.
Sure,
I can tell you, because this was kind of when everything was
it filmed the day you posted it? Because it's here.
Yeah, on the 12th. Okay. On the 12th.
Okay, the 11th here, but the 12th there. Okay. So you write Gaza. Oh wait, let me make sure. 1 second. You write. Share audio. God, so you met this girl. What is her name? Layla, right?
Layla, yeah.
Layla, 17, and you write, Gaza is waiting for us. Jerusalem is waiting for us. Sheikh Jarrah is waiting for us. Layla, 17, a young Palestinian girl in Bethlehem, breaks down in tears when I ask her what her message is to the world. So let's just show this actual video. And this is Youmna asking the questions.
احنا اليوم جينا نصر الشيخ جراح اولا، والقدس والتهويدات والانتهاكات اللي بتسويها اسرائيل في ساحات القدس وبدنس مقدسنا واقصانا. شو رسالتكم للمواطنين الفلسطينيين؟ انضموا لنا واطلعوا، غزه بتستنى فينا والقدس بتستنى فينا، الشيخ جراح
رسالتك للعالم؟
احنا فلسطينيان، هاي الارض بس إلنا.
ليش متواجدين اليوم؟
احنا اليوم جينا نصر الشيخ جراح
So
اولا.
just watching it again for
والقدس
people who are just
والتهويدات
catching up.
والانتهاكات
We'll just watch it once more because it's so
إسرائيل
short.
في ساحات القدس وبدنس مقدسنا واقصانا.
شو رسالتك للمواطنة الفلسطينية لأهل القدس؟
انضموا لنا واطلعوا، غزة بتستنى فينا والقدس بتستنى فينا، والشيخ جراح
شو رسالتك للعالم؟
احنا فلسطينيان، هاي الارض بس إلنا.
ليش متواجدين اليوم؟
احنا اليوم
Okay,
جينا نصر
so that
الشيخ
was pretty
جراح
moving, and so that was taken down from TikTok. Your TikTok of that was taken down.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I uploaded that to TikTok and that was taken down. I just shared another video of you of just sort of the tear gas and stuff that happens at the protests. But yeah, so that video, I uploaded it to TikTok. And I mean, I don't know exactly which day it got taken down, exactly how many. It was up for several days, but I just sort of went back to check on my profile and realized yesterday that it had been taken down, and this was the same day that you actually pointed out that my Twitter had been restricted. So thanks for catching that. I mean, I woke up I was obviously sleeping when that all happened,
Right.
and I woke up and I saw, people had been messaging me about it and whatever. And I guess what had happened was when people would try to go on my profile, they got this message saying that this account has been temporarily restricted, and you had to sort of click and say if you wanted to continue and see the tweets. And then on my end, when I to go in on my account, it was the same thing. It's, your account has temporarily been restricted. Please follow these XYZ steps to reinstate it. It wasn't difficult. It essentially was that I had to prove that I wasn't a robot. So I don't know if it was being reported by people or what, but that's sort of what happened to me. And it's been happening a lot. I mean, if you've been on Twitter and you've been following Palestinians and Palestinian activists who have been really active on social media and, in recent weeks, they've been reporting like really severe censorship across all social media platforms. I mean, Facebook has been censoring any content on Palestine for a really long time. And then at the beginning, when stuff was sort of heating up around Sheikh Jarrah, people were saying that any sort of content that had the hashtag Save Sheikh Jarrah or any of their content on Palestine was getting censored on Instagram. And the same thing has been happening on Twitter. Palestinian activists had their accounts restricted in similar ways that mine was restricted. Some people, I think it was more severely. It was difficult for them to get back in. So yeah, this has been happening a lot of a Palestinian rights group.
I love the idea. Sorry, I cut you off. Yeah.
Hamlet, which is the Arab Center for the Advancement of Social Media. They just came out with a report saying that basically in the past, from May 6th to the 19th, they documented at least 500 cases of the violation of Palestinian digital rights and the censorship of content coming out against Palestine. So that's just been in the past like 2 weeks.
Yeah, I like the idea that it must be a robot. Someone's producing material showing Israeli violations of human rights. It must be a robot. Yeah, when I clicked on it, it was like something like this person has been. I should have screenshot it. It's something like this person is because of suspicious activity, I think.
Something like that. It take me a second to.
But just imagine all the people who it's just something that obviously you can say, yes, I still want to proceed, but it's something that will it's like something that just gets, it's like it's just suppression on your end.
Yeah.
I mean, on their end of your stuff. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And the same thing has been happening to so many people I know. People are getting, shadow banned on TikTok. I mean, even I've seen it from just maybe a week ago, my entire For You page was all stuff about Palestine. And this is not from the usual, progressive sort of leftist circles of people who are already talking about Palestine. These were like random teenagers in middle America talking about Palestine, and now it's already, I've seen significant, unless I'm seeking those videos out, they're not coming up on my For You page. Organizations like the IMEU have said that
What's
their
For
content,
You? Sorry, I don't know what For You
is. It's like the Explore page on Twitter. It's called on TikTok. It's called the For You page.
Got it.
Yeah,
okay, got it.
So it's essentially like your Explore page or your feed, whatever. So even the IMEU, which is an amazing organization that does incredible work and advocacy on Palestine, they have a really awesome TikTok account where they do these obviously short videos about Palestine. They have more than 13,000 followers. Their videos typically get upwards of 500,000 views. And they posted a screenshot showing, however many views, all 500,000 and above that their previous videos got. And then their most recent video that had been up for more than 24 hours only had like 200 views. So it's pretty blatant, censorship and that's been going on. So yeah.
But guys, that's Mark Zuckerberg is going to save us. So I just want to show another clip, and then we're going to get into the most recent activity. But I want to show another clip of something that you experienced. Let's see, which is getting tear gassed. Hold on one second.
Mm-hmm.
Gas mask.
Also, if you want to put Yumna in your bio, you can just put like, your handle and say you covered this or Mondo Weiss, whatever. So people who watch it will know. Okay. So here's another. And this is from the 15th. So it's not, we're going to get to recent stuff soon, but this is just giving some background.
Gas mask. Here, please. Put on my gas mask. But as you can see, the protesters have been dispersed.
And just for people watching, this is May 15th.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it gets, the reason it's silent now, there's no audio, is because I had lost my mic sort of in the commotion of all of that. So I ended up thankfully finding it later. A Palestinian colleague had ended up finding it and returned it to me, which was really nice. But yeah, so that's just a small glimpse into what happens at the protest here, and that happens, all across the occupied West Bank at these demonstrations. You have people that are peacefully demonstrating in large numbers. There's people of all different ages. There's a lot of children often at these protests. And in Bethlehem specifically, people march up to the Israeli military base, and then almost immediately the military will come out and start shooting tear gas and other things at protesters. And these, as you can see in the video, there are like dozens of rounds that are being shot at within seconds. And these aren't being shot from, single canister guns. They're being shot out from Israeli military jeeps that have these like rigs on top of them that shoot out tear gas, dozens of rounds just within a matter of seconds.
And we're going to be having Jeff Halper come on to talk about what's happening in Jerusalem. As you guys said before, you guys are close but so far away at the same time. What do you want to share that's happened from where you are since the ceasefire has been called?
Yeah, so it's been an interesting, couple of days. There was so much that was going on and so much that was happening at the same time. I guess since the ceasefire happened, there have still been protests in Bethlehem. There have still been protests happening all across the West Bank. Again, because this has never just been about Gaza. It was never just about getting a ceasefire. It was obviously Palestinians. A huge sort of message of a lot of the protests that we were seeing in the past few weeks was Palestinians calling for an end on, the bombardments on Gaza and standing up with fellow Palestinians in Gaza. But it was never just about that. So it's never been just about Gaza or about Sheikh Jarrah or about Jerusalem or about one specific issue. It's always been about, the wider, the larger cause and fight for freedom and liberation. So those protests have continued. It's been interesting to see, I think, something that a lot of people that I've been talking to, a lot of, people who maybe, as people have probably seen on Twitter, something that people were sort of vocalizing as a concern, perhaps after the Gaza ceasefire, was just, consequentially, as a result of the ceasefire, people may then sort of, Palestine might sort of cycle out of the news cycle and out of the media attention on Palestine and sort of the movement that's been happening. And sort of as a consequence, then things might sort of naturally sort of calm down, or this false sense of calm sort of might return to the situation. And so I think that we sort of already kind of saw that immediately, just in terms of once the ceasefire was called, sort of around the world in the international media, and even, you know, to some respect on the ground, people are obviously relieved that people weren't being, you know, like massacred anymore.
Right.
But there's definitely this desire and this sense of urgency here to sort of keep the momentum going that people have had over the past 2 weeks in terms of, you know, international solidarity and support, and these uprisings that have been, and protests that have been growing across Palestine. So there's definitely a sense right now on the ground of the desire to sort of keep that momentum and keep the movement going.
Yeah. And anything else that you want to make sure that we talk about before we bring in Jeff?
I think I would just say that for those who are following, you know, Palestinian activists and scholars and people who are talking about this subject, really listen to them when they say that a ceasefire is not an end to the occupation. It is not a ceasefire does not mean that the occupation is over, that you know, Israeli apartheid and the Israeli oppression of Palestinians, specifically in Gaza, is not over. You know, something I spoke to a Palestinian humanitarian worker in Gaza for my latest story for Weiss, and she said a ceasefire is just a band-aid. You know, it is, we're not getting to the root of the problem. So long as we're not addressing the root of the problem, which is the Israeli occupation, the continued siege on Gaza. So long as we don't address those core issues and people don't continue to speak up about those issues, the situation is not going to improve, and it's not going to change.
Yeah, very important. And by the way, I just want to thank everyone for watching these videos and tuning in and watching the clips. And make sure you share them. Share them at online right now. Actually, everyone should share and like this stream, because we want to make sure that people see this and learn about these stories, because like people like Yumna are doing really important coverage. And you know, we see a lot of people talking about this conflict, quote unquote conflict, and not a lot of people outside of a couple of voices on CNN actually are there and doing the reporting. So very grateful to Yumna. And everyone share this stream right now. So we're going to bring on, I think we're going to bring on Jeff Halper, who is of no relation, but we do know each other. I'm also chiding the chat, which is probably not a good idea because it just gives more attention. But like, if you're just stop, can you just pay attention to this or leave? I guess I shouldn't tell you to leave. Just stop. Just be quiet. If you're debating other shows and stuff, like it's annoying, and you can do that. I don't know. Go like start a DM stream. Start doing that on DM. Anyway. Okay. Thank you. Sorry about the school mom interruption. Jeff, welcome.
Good to be with you both.
Thank you. And again, thank you so much for coming on to the show. Can you tell us what you are seeing from Jerusalem? Then we're going to get into a little bit after, we can get into the state of the one state solution. But yeah, tell us what you're seeing from your end.
Well, you know, here, it's obviously very different from Yumna's experience. It was just a poll done. It was just watching the news. 47% of Israeli Jews say that there shouldn't have been a ceasefire, that we ended too soon. You know, that we should have kept going. So that's where Israel is.
47%?
47% of American Jews.
Of American Jews or Israeli? Sorry, of American Jews or Israeli Jews?
No, Israeli Jews. People here in Israel.
47% wish there had not been a ceasefire. Okay, of Israeli Jews.
The ceasefire came too early.
Right. Wow.
And you know, Netanyahu did not come out looking good. In other words, it really came out in some ways politically a tie. Although I think Hamas has the advantage in terms of public opinion, probably. and so that Israel is Israel. Look, Israel's stuck. It's stuck and it isn't stuck in a sense. It's stuck in that there is no political solution. I mean, what Yumna and the Palestinians are talking about liberation is obviously unacceptable to Zionism and to Israel. Israel has the opposite point of view, and that is, of course, that because Zionism, we have to understand, this is really important for everything, to understand what's happening yesterday, is that Zionism was a settler colonial movement. In other words, this isn't a conflict. When you talk about you always talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, or the Israeli-Arab conflict. It's not a conflict. Conflict has two sides, and they're roughly symmetrical, and they fight with each other. And the way you get out of a conflict is you compromise and negotiate, and you find some kind of a peace. But settler colonialism, like Zionism is unilateral. There are no natives. There are no Palestinians. They have no rights. Israel, until today, has never recognized the existence of the Palestinian people, let alone their national rights. And the whole point of Zionism, the whole point of the last 125 years, has been to Judaize Palestine. In other words, to transform an Arab country into a Jewish country, transform Palestine into the land of Israel. And that goes all the way through. So there is no political process. There's no, when people are saying, okay, now what? With the ceasefire, can we now renew negotiations? What about the two-state idea? Where does Biden come in? All that, Israel has no interest in any of that. So what's Israel's plan? Israel's plan is a low-intensity conflict. Low-intensity warfare. In other words, the idea being...
Hold on 1 second, Jeff. Sorry to interrupt you. Sorry. 1 second. Can you... I think you're touching your laptop or something. I just want to make the sound as good as possible. Okay, keep going. You're Jewish, so you move your hands. It's not your fault.
Okay, and just one more sentence. Simply the idea that we can manage the Palestinians, that they're manageable. The conflict can be at a very low level that really doesn't affect Israelis' personal security. And once in a while there'll be a flare-up, like in Gaza. Okay, but that's tolerable. I mean, the Palestinians lost 260 people, something like that. The Israeli side lost 10, which is completely acceptable, if you want to put it in that sense for Israelis. And so they have no motivation to get into political negotiations. There's no international pressure for political negotiations. And it can't get into political negotiations because it wants the entire country. It has nothing to negotiate. And that's the situation that we all have to begin to deal with, I think.
And so what is, okay, Youmna, anything you want to add on that, by the way? Sorry to...
No, I mean, I've just been nodding my head the whole time because I mean, first of all, it's interesting to me to see, the perspectives from someone inside Israel. But yeah, everything that Jeff has said is completely true, and is something that people need to keep in mind when framing what's happening and when approaching the situation here.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that what you said, Jeff, where it's like, and I'm sorry, I cut you off right as you were rounding up your final point. So can you say that again, since I cut it off to try to get the sound better, but you were basically saying they want to manage them. Can you just say that again?
Yeah, that Israel's strategy is to manage the Palestinians. In other words, to keep the conflict, if you want to say a conflict, under the radar. The deal, I think, between Israel and Europe and the West and the international community is that as long as Israel keeps the lid on, as long as it doesn't disrupt the region, as long as it doesn't lead to wars all the time, as long as it keeps things more or less manageable, it's fine. In other words, Biden or the Europeans or nobody wants to expend the political capital they would have to expend in order to really force Israel back. And I mean, the whole idea of a two-state solution is ridiculous.
Done, right?
It's always been ridiculous.
Yeah.
But nobody's going to expend that capital, you see. And Israel knows it. And Israel knows there'll be no sanctions. It can violate human rights and international law with impunity because it knows there's no sanctions, because the only instrument of sanctions that the international community has is the Security Council. And the United States isn't going to allow that. We saw that. The United States vetoed 3 Security Council resolutions trying to end this thing the last week. So Israel's in a kind of a safe zone. It can do anything it wants to the Palestinians, basically, and continue its process as long as, again, it keeps it manageable. It doesn't appear too oppressive. That's where it crossed the line last week, that it didn't mean to cross. I don't think Israel anticipated the Hamas attack. So that was a miscalculation. It crossed that line, but usually it stops before that line. So it keeps everything kind of simmering at an acceptable level so the international community doesn't feel that it has to intervene.
Right. And so the acceptable level is your more kind of mundane violence that is standard. In other words, just so people know, and I'm sure that people watching this stream know, but it's not, Jeff isn't saying like there isn't violence and everything is like, tutti frutti or whatever. Everything is cool until these things happen. It's like there's constant, consistent violence, and then it just becomes newsworthy, international newsworthy violence. Of course, it's always should be international newsworthy violence, but it's, Chomsky talks about
but
worthy victims.
But as long as Israel keeps it within the framework of terrorism.
Right.
In other words, Israel has criminalized Palestinian resistance, so that it's not a resistance, it's not a liberation movement, as Youmna calls it, which it is. It's not a liberation movement. It's a, because what settler colonialism does, I just wrote a book, by the way, if I want to.
Yes, which I think is arriving.
Decolonizing Israel, Liberating Palestine, where I really get in, because settler colonialism is a very powerful analysis that's in the academic community, but it hasn't quite yet gotten out to the wider public because it sounds very academic. Right. It is academic.
Yeah.
But basically, what settler colonialism says is that again, it's a zero sum sort of a thing, so that it's not a conflict. And that's what really going back to what I was talking about before. If you understand the settler colonial idea, you'll understand that its goal is not only to Judaize and make this country Jewish, but that be perceived as Jewish, you see? So when you're sitting in New York or London or wherever you are, and you think of Israel, or you think of this part of the world, you think of Israel, and Israel is Jewish, and now we're just in the Eurovision song contest, you see? So Israel's in the Eurovision song contest, not Palestine.
Oh, yeah, right.
You see, so that you begin to normalize things. And then when you have Palestinian resistance, there's no context because there's no you've depoliticized, you see? So Palestinian resistance comes out as violence. See, Hamas, they're throwing rocks. Israel has a right to defend itself. That makes sense if you have no political context. If Israel's a normal country, if Israel's Nebraska, we're all hanging around in Omaha having a cup of coffee, and all of a sudden people from Kansas start throwing rockets at us. You're right. That's it's crazy. It's just violence out of nowhere. But if you have this political perspective that Youmna certainly is trying, and Palestinians are trying, and I'm trying to introduce, that goes back to the idea of why settler colonialism? Because that tells you the logic of what's happening. Unless you get the logic, you can't understand each particular event.
Right.
You try to explain every event by itself doesn't make any sense to people. That's always been our problem. We've never given people a really good, coherent framework on which they can begin to approach this whole issue and begin to understand the Palestinian logic of resistance. But Israel has done that very well. You see, Hasbara,
which is propaganda,
is very good, and they present a very compelling, case that makes sense.
Yeah. And have your I want to ask both of you, have your perspectives on this changed like recently? I know you've been there, Jeff, since for decades. by the way, Jeff's training is as an anthropologist. And I remember you saying, Jeff, when I interviewed you years and years ago, you wanted to go work somewhere as an anthropologist, but you didn't want to go. You kind of felt like Israel, as problematic as it was different. You know, it's funny. Right. I should let you explain it, but the way I remember thinking of it when you told it to me, you were like, I don't want to go to Kenya and be like a white Jewish guy in Kenya. But if Israel, I can be a white Jewish guy in Israel, and like you were at least potentially infiltrating. That's how I viewed it. You probably didn't.
What I call myself in my book is a settler who refuses.
Okay, yeah.
And that's a certain status in there. That's a political space that I can begin to work out of with my Palestinian colleagues. That's not a space I would have had in Kenya. I would have been a settler, with no context whatsoever.
Right. And Yumna, you obviously have different identification and role, but what made you want to go to report in this region? And has your view changed since being there?
Yeah, I mean, I'd first just like to comment on what Jeff just said, and I think it's a huge issue, at least with what I've been seeing in the discourse, specifically maybe surrounding certain Israeli, like members of the Israeli left or people who consider themselves to be, liberal Zionists even, is that people in those circles cannot come to terms with Zionism as a settler colonial ideology and cannot come to the terms with themselves being settlers and come to the terms with the fact that they have also contributed in some way, or they have benefited from the system of oppression that has dispossessed and continued to dispossess Palestinians. So I just think it's really great that, Jeff is, taking that position and acknowledging that. And I think that's something that if at least within those certain, progressive or liberal circles, that's what needs to happen if we want to move the needle forward. But anyways, in response to what you were asking about me, I mean, I was always interested in Palestine. Since I was young, I grew up in a Muslim household, so it was interesting. Sort of my journey to Palestine, I think, was a little different. I always learned about Palestine and Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa specifically, just from a religious perspective, because obviously it's very important to Muslims. It's the third holiest site in Islam. I had lots of Palestinian friends growing up, so I knew what Palestine was. I knew that I cared about it. I knew that there were grave injustices that were happening in Palestine, but I only truly sort of came to terms with, first of all, that I shouldn't care about this as a religious issue. I should care about this, as a human rights issue and as a political issue. When I took my first trip to Palestine when I was in college, and then, continued to come back here subsequently after that. And I think that just speaks to kind of the current moment that we've been seeing, sort of with the censorship of people, who are speaking up about Palestine on social media, censorship within the industry, within, the journalism industry, of anyone who takes a stance on Palestine is suppressed to some degree or another. You risk losing your job. And I think it's my journey to Palestine is what also influenced my journey in journalism and into journalism. And we were always taught, in journalism school and sort of within the industry of, you can never take a stance, you can never state your opinion, you can never sort of take a moral stance on an issue, because somehow that negatively affects, might negatively affect your journalism. But I think that in issues like this, it's, actually the opposite. Taking a stance on Palestine, actually, supporting Palestinian human rights and the Palestinian freedom for liberation can make you a better journalist and help you look at everything, all different subjects, not just Palestine, with a more critical lens, than one that we're taught to look at things with.
Yeah, did you guys see, I don't know if you saw this, but there was something going kind of viral. I'm looking for the actual tweet, but there is a CNN correspondent, CNN's Jerusalem-based correspondent, posted Hadass Gold. Did you see this? Hold on, let me just share this. She tweeted this out.
Her baby cousin going to the army.
Yeah. So, and I tweeted this should be your Chiron, but so here she is, Hadass Gold, CNN's Jerusalem correspondent. Send me tacos. Okay, I don't know how they would last. It probably wouldn't even get through the. You couldn't even send them from Gaza. Definitely could not send them from Gaza. Okay, so if you're not in Gaza, send her tacos. And then she had tweeted, my baby cousin entered the Israeli army today. And it has it looks kind of like an elf. I don't know how to describe it, but it's, I guess, her baby cousin in her all green outfit, looking kind of like a Disney character. And so there was some pushback for that for, kind of obvious reasons. And then there was some pushback to the pushback because people were saying it was anti-Semitic to and pushing the dual loyalty trope, which I did see someone talk about in the chat. So let's not do the dual loyalty thing, by the way, guys. We can get to that in a second. But the problem here is, because it does become complicated because like service is compulsory, right? Or you can be refused and I can go to jail, which much praise to people who do that. But the issue here is that
all my kids did.
There you go. So, we're gonna have to. But I don't think you put it out as a cake, right? You didn't give, or if you put them on cakes. But it's. The issue here is that she celebrated it. I think personally, I'm actually not exactly sure how to talk about it because, as Adam Johnson, friend of the show, pointed out on Twitter, his standard is like, if people are, you kind of have to look at people then from the U.S. when they have relatives who are serving. Anyway, that's another kind of side issue, but I thought it was interesting. But yeah, yeah.
I think the interesting thing also, because we saw with AP firing Emily Wilder, right, for her involvement in SJP tweeting about things relating to Palestine, etc., when she was in college. It's like so many, and we saw, with CNN's firing of Mark Lamont Hill and Reza Aslan and all these other people who have spoken up about Palestine. Well, it's like objectivity is only an issue when it comes to Palestine, or conflicts of interest seem to only be an issue when it comes to people speaking about Palestine human rights. It's not a conflict of interest that CNN's Jerusalem correspondent is celebrating the fact that she has family members in the IDF. It's not a conflict of interest for the New York Times that all of their bureau chiefs live in a house of Palestinians who live in a stolen house of Palestinians who were kicked out during the Nakba.
Right.
Like, that's not a conflict of interest. And that, several New York bureau chiefs or, correspondents in the region have children in the Israeli army. Like, those aren't conflicts of interest, but it's suddenly a conflict of interest when someone has the audacity to speak up for the basic human rights of Palestinians. And obviously we know that this double standard exists. Everybody who's been talking about Palestine, anyone who's been somewhat involved in, the Palestinian cause knows this as a fact. This has been a reality for so many years, but it continued. I guess just because of how ridiculous it is, I guess I just dumbfounded every single time.
By the way, to go back to something Yumna was talking about before, on the Israeli news, spokespeople for the Israeli government were very proud of the fact that, yes, they turned to Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and other social media to get what they called it, anti-Israeli propaganda removed.
Right.
So, this isn't just something, Yumna, you are sort of the victim of it and you really didn't know it was happening. But in fact, the Israeli government says this, yes, we actually turned to these companies and they said Twitter removed 89% of the content that Israel asked them to remove that had to do with Palestine. 89%. And Instagram, 80-some%. So it isn't that there's algorithms out there, or there's some whatever.
Yeah.
What's happening is the Israeli government is in contact with these companies. The two people that are on the Facebook committee that decides on what should be up on Facebook or not are Israelis. So that, there's a very conscious political tie between the Israeli government and these companies.
Okay. I also wanted to ask you guys about well, Jeff, this is actually I can ask just so you have a question. I'd like to ask both of you. You may find this silly, but the other day I made fun of Debra Messing because she posted some very stupid tweets. But I actually think it would be a good idea, and Max Blumenthal and I kind of had and Leslie Lee had a lot of fun, like debunking some of the talking points that she was obviously spreading. But we didn't. But there's actually, I think, really serious things to get into, really serious PR talking points that we should get into. There, if you guys would be willing to do that. 1 second, sorry. Where is this? It's by this Stand. What is it? Stand Together. It's some organization that's like
Stand With Us.
Stand With Us, probably.
That's a very right wing. But supported by the Jewish establishment. Right.
Yeah. So they're really good at this stuff, right? Like, God, I hate that there's stuff that makes me sound like an anti-Semite, but they're good. This has nothing to do with being Jewish or anything. This has to, in fact, you know who the person who really like woke me up to the fact that Jews are not responsible for Israel, which doesn't mean we shouldn't be saying not in our name and stuff, because they obviously try to weaponize us, but was Ali Abu Nima. He was like, Jews are not Israelis. Like,
right.
So, yeah. So 1 second, I'm just trying to find.
While you're looking at this, can I make another point?
Of course, yes.
Because we're going to talk a little bit about the one state idea.
Yeah.
And that is, and this is where we have to go beyond talking about liberation. Liberation is important. I mean, the title of my book is Liberating Palestine. It is but the question is, what do we mean by liberation?
Right.
And the Palestinians have to define, in the end, what the struggle is, what liberation means. And we have to follow the Palestinians. Right. I mean, we critical Israelis and, of course, the international community that can be mobilized by them. And until today, there isn't a strong, coherent voice about where are we going. There's no leadership coming from the Palestinians. And that's a problem. So I'm involved with a Palestinian-led initiative that's just beginning to get off the ground. It's called the One Democratic State Campaign.
And I tried to have a Palestinian counterpart on the show. I just want people to know, but he's sick. Yeah.
Right.
So I don't want people to think I'm leveling, centering.
Come on, but that won't be a problem. They're happy to come on. But you can see under my name, it's onestatecampaign.org is our website. And one of the things we've done over the last couple of years, Palestinians and Israelis together, is to really formulate a very detailed and I think a very solid 10-point political program. Now, whether this is the political program or not, I'm not trying to say that this is the solution. But what I'm trying to say is that this has to be done. This work has to be done. There has to be political work led by Palestinians to define what is our political program. Because without a political program, without an end game,
right,
everybody's left hanging. We can't represent Palestinians. Now, I can't tell them 1 state, 2 states, 10 states, do this, do that. It's not my role, and certainly not your role, Katie, in New York. We can support the Palestinians, but they have to be the ones to lead. And this is an attempt to try to begin that process. So beyond resistance, it's a mixed bag, because one of the famous slogans coming out of Palestine, you see it on the wall all over, is to exist is to resist, which is a nice idea, but then you begin to say, wait a minute, is that it? What about what's beyond resistance? What are we resisting for? What are we BDSing for? We have a whole BDS campaign that isn't that political. The 3 elements of BDS are not a political program. So everybody's, not buying Hewlett-Packard, but what are we BDSing for? What's the end game? In this fight against apartheid in South Africa, there was always an end game. There was one person, one vote. Everybody knew that was what we were fighting for. And de Klerk would come to Mandela with all kinds of ideas, power sharing and 3 seats of government and this and that. And Mandela would always say, no, this is and everybody knew that this is what we were doing. We don't have that with Palestine. We know the 2-state solution is gone, but we don't have a replacement. And so I think this is one of the things that we're trying to do, is work with Palestinians, because unless there's a Palestinian buy-in to a political program, and I think one democratic state over all of historic Palestine, with the return of refugees, of course, it's the only way out, because the only way you end settler colonialism is through decolonization. So in a sense, Israel has almost defined for the Palestinians what the nature of the struggle is. It's not conflict resolution. It's not negotiations. It's not 2 states. We know that. We know what it isn't. Right. What it is an anti-colonial movement, right? So what is that? So now the Palestinians have to say, what does that mean? What are our interests? What do we need? How do we decolonize Zionism? And how do we liberate Palestine? And those are the questions, and not enough Palestinians are asking those questions today, in my view, at least. I'd be interested to hear what Youmna has to say about that, without putting you on the spot, Youmna.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, these are conversations that I see happening in the streets with friends, with Palestinians that I talk to just in everyday life. I think that it's definitely a mixed bag. I think that there definitely, I don't think, in what I've seen, of course, I can't speak on behalf of Palestinians, but in terms of what I've witnessed in my reporting and speaking to people, that there isn't one singular consensus sort of on 1-state solution, 2-state solution, etc. But just if we're talking about the discourse surrounding the 1-state solution, just in the past, 5 years that I've been here, I've seen actual changes from friends, from colleagues, people who once, didn't support that idea, or were once, sort of still supporting the 2-state solution or something similar to that, have now sort of moved forward to say, actually, I don't really think that there's any other viable sort of solution other than the 1-state solution. I still think that, again, from what I've seen, it's not a conversation that's being had in the Palestinian mainstream, in the Palestinian streets. I think it's a conversation that's being had a lot in Palestinian academic circles, and liberal, progressive Palestinian circles online, etc. But something that a lot of people don't really realize is that oftentimes the discourse that we see amongst Palestinian scholars and academics online is very different than the discourse that's happening in the streets, in the camps, in the cities, in the towns, etc. So I think that it's a concept that's being discussed more and more since I've been here. But yeah, I think it's safe to say that it still hasn't really completely permeated the mainstream. And I think I understand where Jeff is coming from. I understand that sort of need, and it's something that Palestinians talk about all the time. It's like, okay, once we achieve liberation, then what? It was literally having this conversation with people the other day, with a group of friends, and mostly young Palestinians. And they were talking about the fact that, okay, well, what happens next if we do manage to achieve liberation, if we do manage to sort of keep this momentum with these uprisings and this movement going forward? What happens next? We saw what happened in Egypt. We saw what happened in Tunisia. We saw what happened essentially in the Arab Spring with all the surrounding countries. And, that didn't necessarily have maybe like one unified plan in place, which made way for the current situation that we see in the region. So those conversations are being had. I don't think it's for lack of trying, I guess, at least amongst Palestinians, specifically young Palestinians. And I think more and more, as time goes on, as we see international solidarity continue to grow, as we see movements and sort of these uprisings, you could say, that we've seen in the past 2 weeks, as they continue to happen, these conversations will continue to grow. But so long as I get, just from what I've seen, I get why it's hard, to move past the existence is resistance, for example, or the resistance phase of things, because that is so very much the reality that Palestinians are entrenched in. Not saying that people are incapable of thinking about the future. They very much are, and those conversations are very much being had. But I think it's completely understandable to see why maybe people are focused on the here and now. They're focused on the BDS of now. They're focused on the liberation of now, because they're, the attempt to totally, the ongoing ethnic cleansing of them as a people is very imminent, and it's
Right.
a constant threat. So
yeah, it's hard to like work on a charter when you're trying to
when
avoid
you're
like rubble and being bombed.
and like being like shot while being killed like while
Yeah.
driving in your car, so I get that as well.
Right. Yeah. And anything else that you want to share with us, Yumna, about just things that I think I asked you this last time, like what you wanted to make sure people knew, and you very helpfully provided the context of like how we got here.
Mhm.
Just anything else you wanted to let people know about what it's like living there. Do people, by the way, I have a question. Do people think that you're Palestinian when they interact with you?
I think that, I don't know, are you asking about if Palestinians think I'm Palestinian or like non-Palestinians?
Both.
I mean, both. I think sometimes Palestinians, just because I guess of because I speak Arabic,
Right.
I think to a relatively degree.
Right.
I think I speak Arabic quite well. So sometimes people might think that I have some sort of Arab background, which I
Right.
don't. And so I think people might think that, oh, maybe your dad's Palestinian, your mom's Palestinian, something like that. That's obviously, it's not the case. And then also for non-Palestinians, I think people might just assume like, oh, well, there's
Brown.
a specific, yeah, exactly. Like, especially for white people, they're like, oh, well, there's this
Right.
brown person like in Palestine, so she's probably Palestinian.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. But your accent is like, when they hear your accent, it's like, oh, you didn't grow up in Palestine.
Yeah, I think sometimes people might think I've gotten here because there's so many Palestinians, right, that have dual citizenship,
Right.
like Palestinian
Right.
American.
Yeah.
So people might think I'm sort of fall into that category. But yeah.
But yeah, so I'm just always interested like in how people are perceived where they are. Like, do people ever think you're Palestinian, then they find out you're not? Like, do Palestinians think that you're Palestinian, then they find out you're not? Do like Jews think you're Palestinian, then they find out you're not? Any interesting like stories coming from there?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've had both, right? I think also just like appearance and obviously like race and skin color play a role in everything. But yeah, so when I speak Arabic, people kind of assume that maybe I have some sort of, Palestinian or Arab, maybe not necessarily Palestinian, but maybe any sort of Arab influence. And
Right.
I don't. My parents are Indian by way of South Africa. So that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
You're like, that's my connection. It's the whole apartheid thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's, if you wanted a connection to Palestine, it's the fact that my parents grew up in apartheid South Africa, and they were very active in their youth in the resistance movement in South Africa. So I guess that's the strongest connection.
Right.
Yeah.
What do they think of this? Your parents, if I may ask.
It's interesting. Obviously, I mean, they have their whole personal approach, obviously, because their daughter is living here. As a political human rights situation, it's never been a question growing up. Like I said, it's literally never been a question of that, we should support Palestinian human rights and what's happening, the oppression of Palestinians, what's happening in Palestine is wrong. And from the time we were young, they always compared it. I said I grew up sort of learning about it from a religious perspective, but because my parents had that background, they were very much sort of vocal about that also in our household, and why it was important to draw those parallels between the apartheid, that they lived under and what was happening in Palestine. So I grew up in a family that was, very vocal about that. But then also on a personal level, I think it's hard for them because they knew what it was like to live under, oppressive apartheid regimes. And what it meant to move in those spaces. Obviously, I'm not Palestinian, and so there's so much privilege that comes with being an American, like a foreign journalist. But yeah, on a personal level, I think they worry sometimes, but they get it. They get why I'm here. And anytime they question, why, oh, maybe why do why do you still want to stay there? Why do you want to be there? I always just tell them, well, I grew up with two parents who I literally grew up hearing stories about them resisting the apartheid regime in South Africa. And those are the stories that I grew up hearing, and those are the role models that I had. So I think the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Yeah. And yeah, anything else? I mean, I know that you've been really generous with your time. And just anything else that you want to make sure people know about? Like, I appreciated what you were saying about how, the academic online consensus doesn't necessarily represent the, non-academic consensus. Anything else that you want to make sure people know about that you experienced while you're there?
Yeah. I mean, obviously I can take this. This isn't just a shameless plug for Weiss, but genuinely it's good, obviously, to diversify, your sources for news and for learning about what's happening on the ground in Palestine. There are an array of different voices coming out of Palestine, and it's great to seek those out on places like Weiss, places like Electronic Intifada, Middle East Eye, IMU, all these different organizations that are doing really great work and telling all different kinds of Palestinian stories that you might not necessarily be getting online. And I guess what I would finish with is that I think we're living in a moment now. We've definitely seen this huge moment that's happened over the past couple of weeks. And I would encourage people, no matter, the different smear campaigns that we're already seeing to come out, and the different threats and restrictions and censorship that we're seeing, I would still encourage people to continue to speak out and to continue to push the narrative and shift the narrative as we move forward, and to continue to amplify Palestinian voices as we continue to move forward.
Yes, and I'm having a bunch more of those on, by the way. So bringing back some old standards. Ali Abunimah is coming back on, and I'm also bringing on people who I have not had on before. So I'll be doing more earlier streams like this. So yes, definitely. I didn't mean to ask you to on behalf of Palestinians. So you're not one, but you're just saying that you're just encouraging people to do that, which I co-sign.
Because even as someone who's lived here for so long, I've lived in this community for so long. I've been reporting on Palestine for so long, and I still the best thing that I continue to do for myself is to continue to educate myself and continue to learn and follow the lead of the people around me. So. Yeah.
Great. Okay. And keep us in the loop. You should come up. I do want to get Miko Peled. Do you guys know him? He's like the son of some Israeli butcher. Not butcher, really. I mean, I'm being he's the son of some Israeli general or something. And he's super critical. Anyway, we'll do that.
His father, the general, was also critical. He was a communist.
Oh, wow. Let's get them both on. Is he not alive anymore?
The father was more critical than the son.
You know what? Forget it. I don't want the son. I want the father. Is the father alive?
The father died a number of years ago.
All right, I'll take the son. I'll take the son only because the father's not alive. Only because the communist, more hardcore critic, not around. You're lucky, Miko. No, or Miko. Youmna's last appearance on the Katie Halper show blew my mind. What about it? By the way, see, I'm really taking down the fourth wall. Was it the way she just totally attacked you went after some talking points. You definitely did a great job. You did the Israel cares about civilians and Hamas doesn't talking point. You also said something really interesting about the problematic nature of the civilians discourse. And then Noor Erekat came on. I don't know if you saw it after, but it was a really amazing segue because Jeff, Yumna was talking about how it's they have to be children. We have to talk, and understandably, people will mention when their children who are killed, but it's almost like the discourse has become, but for the children and the elderly, it's not really that sad what's happening to Palestinians, because there is this, implicit kind of implicit representation or assumption that Palestinians are kind of like by default like terrorists, and so you have to find the not the non-men victims of it. And then right after you Noor Erekat came on, I offered my belated condolences, but we'd never spoken before, about her cousin, who was a young Palestinian man who had been killed. And then she went on to talk about, because you had mentioned that family of 15 who were her friends' family members. At that point, people thought that 15 had been killed. It's actually been, now we know 21. 22? Okay, so even one up from the 21. And so, yeah, that was, I think that people really don't get, like, if people saw photos of like families, and I don't want to do, I'm not like pitting Israelis and Palestinians against each other, or Jews and Arabs and Muslims. I know that these are not interchangeable, but anyway, the point is, like, if those were Israeli Jewish people and the whole family had been wiped out, like 21 members of a family had been wiped out, it would have been like nonstop headline news. And and I mean, it would have been like the retaliation would have been like unprecedented, but that didn't really happen. So
I think Nora said it perfectly. She said Palestinians have to be the perfect victims. You know, Palestinians are expected to lay down and die. That's what she said, and it's what I've experienced so much in my reporting as well, even when just reporting on Palestinian children that are killed, for example, in the West Bank, like literal children, 16, 14, 15 years old. The second that the army claims that they were throwing stones or that they were participating in a protest, as if it's, I mean, in the army's eyes, in Israel's eyes, it's justification for their killing, right? But also somehow in the media and in just public discourse around Palestine, it's like, yeah, Palestinians really are expected to be perfect victims. They're literally expected to lay down and die. If a 16-year-old was shot and killed throwing stones, people are trained to ask, well, why was he throwing stones? Right. Not why was a child throwing stones seen as so much of a threat that they had to be killed,
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, I mean, I've seen that. It's disgusting. People are like, well, yeah, it's complicated, though, because he was throwing stones. Like, really? And again, it's like, even if were not settler colonialism, clearly, like, throwing stones is not a death, punishable by capital punishment. But, like, the fact that it's in the context that it's in, like, the context is never really described. So it just seems like out of the blue. Right. This is why we can't have nice things.
Yeah.
As opposed to, So, I mean, I'm always surprised. I'm not saying this to be like, to whatever the non-right-wing version of the term virtue signaling is, but, like, I'm always amazed that there isn't more violence. Like, from the people who are resisting. Yeah, but that's, all right. Well, thank you, Youmna. Jeff and I are going to talk more about the one state thing. You're, of course, welcome to, but I know it's late there, and we'll probably bore you with our Halper stories. I'm just kidding. But
thanks for having me. It's great talking to you. It's great talking to you,
yes.
Jeff.
You're our West Bank. You are a non-Palestinian West Bank stringer. So we're going to have a Palestinian West Bank stringer too.
I hope so. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay,
Bye.
Nice to meet you, Yumna.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see. Oh, great. Having these discussions gives me hope. By the way, everyone share this. Share this stream. You can support on Patreon, and I'm going to do a fundraiser soon. But honestly, the more important thing now, excuse me, is to just share the stream so people know that we're talking about these things, because they're pretty important. And Jeff, can I ask you some more questions?
Of course.
All right. So I wanted to ask you, and I think it's an interesting and uncomfortable thing to talk about, right? Because it's like, we want to take the lead from Palestinians. I just want to be honest about something I keep hearing that I used to just like dismiss, and I kind of still do, but I realize it's not effective if we want to actually like reach people. So and it's funny, I said this to Norman Finkelstein, who's become like a weekly feature of the show, and I should have you guys on too, and also you and Nora. But I said something to him about how people are like, oh, well, if it becomes a one state, then Hamas is going to be in power and they will like throw the gays and women from the rooftops, which I think is a bit hyperbolic, obviously. But people do really think that, or they think something along those lines. And then, some people really think that genuinely. Some people are cynically saying that, knowing it's not really going to happen. But when I brought this up to Finkelstein, he was like, well, it would, I'm not going to do my Norm impersonation. It would be, he basically said that it's not the South Africa situation, right? It isn't this one person, one vote framing as of yet. But I don't even know, like, shouldn't we just step back? And I want to both step back and let Palestinians take the lead. And I also don't know what to say when people freak out about it, because I kind of casually was like, well, if they have to leave, the Jews have to leave. Is that something that has to be accepted, like either implicitly or explicitly, before, if we're going to be honest about the potential one state?
Well, we simplify Palestinians a lot. I mean, that's what Yumna was always talking about as well, and Nora. First of all, Hamas is a political party. It isn't a terrorist organization like Biden and the U.S. claims it is. So and it's very complex. They have like every political party, they have a military wing, they have a political wing. There's disagreements.
Sorry, 1 second. I just want to clarify. I wasn't adopting the framing of Hamas being this terror. Okay, I just want people to know that. I was quoting people. So
But there was back in, I think, 2006. All the where are the Palestinian leaders today? Most of them are either dead or they're in prison, and we have to keep that in mind as well. So in about 2006, Palestinians in prison from all the different factions, from the left and the right, from the PFLP all the way across to Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, all got together in prison, the leaders, and came up with what's called the prisoner's document that you can look up online. And Hamas signed on to it. And it's a two-state idea. It's a very moderate document saying that if Israel really agrees to withdraw from the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza, the 22%, we will recognize, we might not recognize Israel. Hamas didn't go so far as to say they'll recognize Israel because they don't want to legitimize colonialism. I mean, there's a logic to that as well. But they're willing to live at peace with Israel, sign an agreement with Israel. So basically Hamas and they've repeated that many times over the years, that Hamas basically accepted the two-state idea. It's Israel and the international community that's pushed them, in a sense, to where they are. But another important thing to remember is that the Palestinians were always the most secular of all the Arab populations. Why? You have to say, well, what is Hamas? Why Hamas? I mean, Hamas came out because, the Fatah, who was the revolutionary leadership, mainly under Arafat, gave in to Israel. In 1980, Fatah and the PLO began as an anti-colonial organization in the middle 60s. In 1988, they gave up the anti-colonial struggle, accepted the two-state idea, recognized the state of Israel, and then got into this whole ridiculous Oslo peace process. So Hamas has remained all these years the only effective, and jihad as well, Islamic Jihad, the only effective Palestinian organizations that still have an anti-colonial idea, that we have to decolonize Palestine. Not that we have to throw all the Jews into the sea. That isn't what they say. Right. But that we have to have, equal rights. And it's true. It's not a secular idea. That's the problem. I'm not crazy about Islamic fundamentalism. I'm not a Hamas supporter in any way, because I don't think any religious fundamentalism is the way to go. But in a sense, that's the default position that Israel has left the Palestinians with, because Israel will not deal with the PA, with the Palestinian Authority. It won't deal with the Abbas. It won't deal with the PLO. It won't deal with the secular forces. It only deal with Hamas. Hamas is the only political party that Israel deals. Israel is the one that's empowered Hamas. Right. Israel, in a sense, created Hamas as a counterweight to the PLO. And today, if Hamas is really the leader, it's not that the Palestinians all of a sudden become religious, or they're all into Al-Aqsa as a religious kind of thing. Al-Aqsa is a much bigger symbol than simply religion.
Right.
But that Israel has left the field open only for Hamas and Islamic Jihad, and so there's a distortion. So I think in a situation where a decolonization process takes place, and we begin to really think about the future, and we start to talk to each other and move towards decolonization, other forces. I mean, Hamas will be a voice, but other forces will come into the fore as well. And so we can't make Hamas the person of the Palestinian people.
Right. But also, can't we, I guess this is the thing that I don't know exactly. It's not really up to us. When I say us, I mean
That's
you guys
right.
there,
That's
right?
exactly.
I mean, it's like, unfortunately, or for better or for worse, it's like we can't really, we have to just wait and see what happens, because.
Well, there's two ways you can go.
Yeah.
That's in South Africa. Yumna could probably tell us better than me, but in South Africa, the whites did not participate, obviously, in the dismantling of apartheid. That was a black struggle, the ANC struggle.
Yeah.
There were some whites that helped, but it was an ANC.
I didn't know that there was
struggle.
such a high up Jewish white guy in the ANC.
And it was a fairly high Jewish, of Nelson Mandela, the 5 white members of Nelson Mandela's first government, they were all Jews.
Of course.
But that aside, it was only when the international community and internal opposition made the collapse of apartheid, forced a transition, that then the whites began to get involved.
Right.
And they did play a certain role, especially in keeping the economy white, in a sense. Here, that the same thing is true is going to happen. The Israeli Jewish public is not going to be an active partner. They're never going to agree to liberation of Palestine or decolonization or anything. So we have to kind of work around them, in a sense. The question is, when do they come into the picture? Once the Israeli apartheid system collapses, will Israeli Jews come in at that point, like they did in South Africa, like the whites in South Africa, and help rebuild the new country? Or is that rebuilding going to have to be done by Palestinians, and the Israelis are going to be sullen and sit in a corner and just get whatever they get? At what point? I don't know the answer to that. But the point is that the thrust of liberation, the initial impetus towards liberation, the vision of liberation, the plan of liberation, maybe even the constitution that would develop, is going to have to be done by Palestinians. Now that's where somebody like me can help, because being an Israeli, but being a critical anti-colonial Israeli, there aren't a lot of us, but there weren't that many whites in South Africa that worked with the ANC as well. What we can do is we can act as kind of a bridge, because I know where the Israeli mind is. I know where most of my neighbors are, you see? So I can be in this process talking with Palestinians as we're beginning to form a vision of what the future would be like. In a way, I can represent my Israeli brethren or fellow countrymen, whatever you want to call them, in a way that they wouldn't want to be represented. They don't agree to be represented, but in a sense that ensures that whatever liberation concept, it has to be inclusive.
Yeah.
We're not in Algeria.
Yeah.
The Israelis are not leaving. Right. And so the Palestinians know that, and they have to bite that bullet and come up with a liberation plan that gives them their liberation and their sovereignty and the access to the entire country and everything else, but also with mechanisms of living with Israelis with equal rights. And that's not going to be easy, but it has to be a Palestinian-led process.
And it's not going to be Algeria just because of the numbers, by virtue of for starters.
Yeah, like in South Africa as well, it was the same thing. I mean, there are the United States is a settler colonial country. See, settler colonialism wins in a way,
Yeah.
If the settler state becomes so strong and so established that the indigenous people just they can't overthrow it. Now, the indigenous were the French colonists in Algeria, even though they were in Algeria for 150 years, and they felt Algerian, were a very small minority.
Right.
In South Africa, they were a fairly small minority, but they were so powerful economically and militarily and so on that they couldn't be thrown out.
Yeah.
And I think that, and it's certainly in the U.S., the Native Americans would probably love to throw out all you guys, but it's not going to happen. So sometimes the indigenous people have to bite that bullet and say, okay, now how can we carve out a maximum sovereignty and lands and a cultural space and so on within a settler colonial environment that we can't prevent.
It's the Orthodox Jews that are, I mean, they're making it so that, but for them, like, there would have to be some kind of, like, reckoning with Palestinians as people. That just, like, I know that this is a problematic discourse and people think it sounds eugenicist, but obviously just looking at numbers, which this is, I mean, I'm not, like, cheapening people to numbers, but obviously that makes a huge difference. You have, like, all these people populating, like, making Aliyah, you know, the settlers, and it's just like,
And what is true is that there won't be a Jewish state. I mean, that's something we have to know. The Palestinians have the same problem. It's not going to be a Palestinian state either. So both peoples have that hump to go over. But, you know, the Palestinians will have a majority. There already is a majority of Palestinians in this country before any refugees return.
Right.
And of course, any just solution has to allow the return of refugees.
Yeah.
So there will be a fairly large Palestinian majority in the country. But at the same time, you know, see, what we're presenting as a one-state idea isn't a threat. Everybody sees it as a threat. Oh, no. We see it as a challenge, as really something very positive. Jews and Palestinians, Arabs, Christians, Muslims have lived together for centuries. There's no primordial, this whole idea that some primordial hatred isn't true. And in fact, we already live together. You know, 21% of Israelis are Palestinian, are you know, Palestinians. So, you know, and what's interesting is their frustration is, you see it today, is that they want to go into Israeli society. And it's the Jews that are keeping them out. You know, they want to integrate governmental-wise, negotiate, get into society, and they're being kept out. So it isn't that they're holding themselves aloof. We're the ones that are keeping them aloof.
Right.
And even in the West Bank, you know, without minimizing at all the violence and oppression of occupation, even on those conditions, Israelis and Palestinians get along pretty well. You know, I mean, there's no equality.
Sure.
And everything else, but we're not at each other's throats all the time. So the idea that we can live together, you know, has been proven, I think, over the last 70 years. What we have to do, though, is to show that potential for living together can be translated into living together as equals and not as Meron Ben-Venishti once said, the relations of Israelis to Palestinians is as a horse to a rider. You know, the Israelis are the rider and the Palestinians are the horse, and there's a relationship. We have a relationship, but it's not the relationship that you really want.
Yeah. I mean, understatement. Yeah. So I wanted to, if you don't mind, I actually think that this is a useful educational teachable moment where we have this. I won't say anything critical of her. Again, Max Blumenthal and Leslie Lee on another show that I did, we went through these talking points, but we didn't actually. I think it's actually important to maybe like go through them somewhat seriously, even though they're so unserious. But so this is this Samhazbara. This guy named Ken or Hen made it, and he's what is his name? I'll Hen. You know him? Oh, that's just a name.
No.
Okay, yeah. Here, I'll but it's can you guys see it? Hen Mazig. Hen Mazig is his name, and he is an Israeli writer, son of a Mazig, an Iraqi Jewish refugees, Mizrahi queer, opinions in Newsweek, LA Times, NBC News, and more. And he does a lot of like Jews in America need your support. Are Jews indigenous people? Experts in archaeology say yes. A lot of, he's really trying to like wokeify
I see
settler colonialism, right?
Yeah,
so here's something that he made, and it's like a weird exchange between, I guess it's a non-Jewish person and a Jewish person. So, okay, I read online, I'm going to read this out loud so we can just respond to them. I read online that Israelis are ethnically cleansing Palestinians. And then the response is, stop taking everything you read online for face value. I think an Israeli wrote this, by the way, because they're little, like, the prepositions are wrong. It's not at face value. Stop taking everything you read online for face value. Palestinians face many challenges and inequalities, but are not being ethnically cleansed. However, Jews have been ethnically cleansed from the rest of the Middle East. So,
that's the opposite of the truth, of course.
Right.
I mean, of course, the Palestinians have been ethnically cleansed. I mean, read Ilan Pappy's book.
Right, exactly,
Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, which he's a professional historian who very carefully documents. I mean, that's not even right-wing Israelis admit ethnic cleansing.
I know. They're so much more honest than America. Yeah, I know. And also, like, I always bring this up, but it's so funny that Benny Morris, who like turned right-wing, is still like, yeah, it was ethnic cleansing.
He says it should have been ethnic cleansing.
It should have been more. There should have been more. Yeah. Right.
He admits it. That's right. So
he admits it. Yeah. So guys, this is not a good talking point.
So that's ridiculous. It has to be ethnic cleansing because, when Zionism began,
there were other people there.
90% of the population was Arab, was Palestinian. Right. So how do you set up a Jewish country in an Arab country?
They were Jew curious.
The land and ethnically cleansing the population.
Right.
I mean, Ben Gurion and Jabotinsky were absolutely crystal clear on this. You don't have to guess. I mean, there's volumes of works by Zionists that actually spell out exactly what they were doing. And some of them even used words like ethnic cleansing.
Yeah, well, that's what Benny Morris was saying. He was like, look, the right-wing Benny Morris. So I've met, just so people know, Benny Morris was one of these new historians. He, criticized Israel, then of course was like, banned. But he was one of the few who stayed in the country, right?
Yeah.
So that's why he went right. But most of them
very
left.
Right-wing.
Yeah. So he became very right-wing, but again, he in his book 1948, he like meticulously documented that there was ethnic cleansing, then he was kind of asked about it. And he's like, yeah, it's
That's right. He wrote The Birth of the Refugee Problem.
Yeah,
that's right.
And he said that it was that or genocide, which is something you hear all the time, and I think stops people in their tracks because they don't want to sound like they're genocide supporters or like they're downplaying the Holocaust. That's another thing we can get to, but just for this slideshow carousel, it's just a lie. There was ethnic cleansing, and there
had to be ethnic cleansing. Otherwise, how are you going to make an Arab country a Jewish country without ethnic cleansing?
They all left. That's what some people like to say.
It's structurally necessary. The other side, though, is not right. Jews were not ethnically cleansed from Middle Eastern countries. Matter of fact, you still have a Jewish population in Morocco and Iran and a big population in Turkey. Jews left. A lot of them left. But a lot of the Christians left as well. This is at a time when the colonialists were leaving. There was a rise in nationalism. Some Jews were involved with Arab nationalism as well. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, it's true that when nationalism arose, especially when Zionism arose too, because that alienated many Jews from their Arab neighbors. Many Jews had to leave because of all but they weren't thrown out. As a matter of fact, Shlomo Hillel, who was the speaker of the Israeli Knesset and the police minister for many years, wrote a book. He was sent, it's well known, he and other agents were sent into Iraq in 1949 and the early 1950s in order to bomb synagogues and markets to scare Jews to leave because the Jews didn't want to leave Iraq. And the Iraqis didn't want to throw them out. And it was the same with Kurdistan. And they had to create this kind of a fear among Jews that they're being attacked, to create the stampede out. So it simply isn't true that the Jews are ethnically cleansed.
Right.
There were movements back, and Jews left, which is true, but not because of an ethnic cleansing campaign.
They were ethnically cleansed by Zionists, in the case you just cited.
Well, in some ways, yes. I mean, in some ways, Zionism is responsible for the biggest cultural Holocaust. Think of Jews that lived all over the world for thousands of years. The cultures, imagine the Iraqi culture, the North African culture, the Yemenite culture, the Russian culture, the cultures of India, cultures of Jews all over the world. And in a sense, to create conditions in which Jews feel they have to leave or get pressured to leave or want them, or you create this idea that you can only be really Jewish if you're in this country here. And of course, Zionism had this idea of negating the exile. They called Jewish, these wonderful, rich Jewish cultures, including American Jewish culture. They called them ephemeral. They called, they weren't real. They were just temporary. You're really Jewish when you're in Israel, which is nonsense, of course. But
right.
Not only nonsense, it's really, this is an anti-Jewish country from the point of view of what Judaism is really about. That's another story.
Yeah.
But the point is that the destruction of Jewish cultures, these historic, ancient Jewish cultures all over the world, was the product of Zionism, not of anything else. Zionism destroyed a rich Jewish world. Only now, I think in the States and other places, are Jews abroad beginning to wean themselves away from Zionism, say Zionism cannot define us, and are beginning to go back and try to reclaim some of their Jewish and legitimize, validate their own Jewish cultures that aren't defined by Israel. But Israel did that. It was very imperialistic towards the Jews because it wants to be the Jewish power, the Jewish center,
right.
The only Jewish voice. And Jews are resisting that, I think.
Yeah. Have you ever spoken to Eli Valley? I should have both of you on the show at the same time. He wrote that book, Israel Boy versus Diaspora Man. No, other way around. Diaspora Boy versus Israel Man. It's really good. Okay, so we got that one out of the way. Okay, next. Isn't the Israeli-Palestinian conflict just a Middle Eastern argument over land between Muslims and Jews? Yes, but not the first. Jewish people have lived in Jerusalem for thousands of years, and they've lived in the Middle East for ages, being oppressed, raped, and murdered by the Arab Empire like Palestinian Christians.
That's ridiculous. First of all, Jews lived a very, very secure life in the Arab world. I don't know what they mean by Arab Empire.
I know. Exactly. Yeah, what is that?
The Ottoman Empire? I mean, I don't know what that means. Arab Empire is a stupid term.
Yeah.
But Jews lived on the contrary. That was, if you compare them to Europe, the chief rabbi of the Jews was sat in Istanbul in the Sultan's court. You had a chief rabbi here in Jerusalem. Jews had a very formal. They had a formal status in the Muslim world. They lived a very secure life, actually, in the Muslim world. So that that part is ridiculous. But the point is, yes, Jews did live here thousands of years, and that's true. They're trying to in the same quote, that same bubble. They're saying they live here thousands of years, trying to give the idea that Jews are sort of like natives and they're really here, but they were always persecuted. It's not true. They lived here. They weren't persecuted. I mean, here and there, there were instances, of course, like in every history, but they lived here, and what Zionism did, you see, Zionism came in and ruined it, because Zionism came in and said, not that, we're Jews, we see the land of Israel as our homeland, we want to come home, we want to revive our national culture, our national language. But we recognize that there's also a Palestinian people here. There are people here, obviously. 90% of the population wasn't Jewish. We acknowledge that. Now we want to come as immigrants, like our forefathers did for thousands of years, live with you, and we can develop our national cultures together. That was the idea of cultural Zionism. Eliezer ben Yehuda, Henrietta Zold, who started Hadassah, Judah Magnus, who started the Hebrew University, Martin Buber. These are all prominent Jewish figures that believe that, yes, we're a national group that should be here in the land of Israel. We want to speak Hebrew and have but we can do that together with Palestinians. We don't need a state. We don't want to ghettoize ourselves again. They were against that. So it's Zionism that brought in the idea that this country belongs to us exclusively. It's ours. We're going to ethnically cleanse it. Get out, you Arabs. You don't belong here. And that was, I mean, the Jews that have lived here for thousands of years, they were appalled by the Zionist attitude. You know, the Jews I wrote a book about the old Yishuv in Jerusalem in the 19th century. They were appalled by the Zionists. The Sephardic Jews who were appalled by the Zionists, because they felt that the Jews were part of the indigenous Palestinian population. So, you know, and they felt that they were being alienated from the people they'd lived with for thousands of years. So that whole quote that you gave, again, everything is reversed. You know, Jews lived very well in the Muslim world, and they did live together with Palestinians until Zionism came and created that alienation and that conflict, basically.
Which doesn't mean there weren't, obviously, because then people are like, "How dare you? There was this. My family was." Obviously, there were episodes, but there are episodes like there were. But it's not this existential incompatibility that people like to claim. And again, it doesn't make sense, because if Jews were there for so long and there was persecution, how did they got almost wiped out? Obviously, in Europe, but you know, this is
the only major persecutions, really. I mean, here and there it depends. You know, if you talk about the Crusader times, or you know, they're not there. The more difficult, it's true, was Iran and Yemen. When you had a Shiite Muslim country, it was harder on the Jews. That's true, but it is also harder on the Christians. Right. You also have to understand that Jews and Christians were very much involved with trade, and they had relations abroad. And when the European colonization began, when Europe, France and Britain and European countries began to come and take over the Middle East, Jews and Christians tended to work with the Europeans because they were the more educated, they did more trade, you know, and so in some ways that alienated them a little bit from the Muslim population that usually wasn't so involved with the Europeans. And then when, you know, the colonists left and the liberation movements began, sometimes it's true that created tensions as well. But for the most part, you know, again, it's true a little bit in the Shiite countries. Jews had more of a problem. But overall, the Jews lived a very secure life in the Middle East.
All right. So that's we got 2 out of 2. What a shame. And what a surprise. They're not being, they're either incorrect. By the way, I tweeted out, so that in case Debra Messing or Hen want to join the chat, I mean, I'm assuming you're open to debating them. Okay, let's see what's next. So those are the 2 of carousel slides, and then we got let's go back to the share. Okay, share screen. Okay, so next slide. Oh wait, whoops. All right.
Who are they sending these slides to?
Obviously there are people who are sending these things out to some like well-known people in Hollywood, you know, so Debra Messing has never been the sharpest knife in the drawer, but she's just, she's, you know, this is part of her. Let me back up.
I don't know who she is.
Oh, sorry. She's from Will and Grace. She's part of the resistance. She's a blue check liberal, like major, you know,
what?
A blue check, like on Twitter. Yeah. She's a blue check. She was on the show Will and Grace, which was a sitcom about a gay man and a straight woman who live together. She's actor Mama, the Dissenters podcast. I know. Global ambassador for HIV,
to talk about the Middle East.
AIDS for what's PSI? Oh, you can also have her do a cameo for you. Oh my God, we should write a cameo script for her, wishing someone happy birthday for like wishing the Nakba happy anniversary or something. That would be great. We'll put our heads together for that later. But here's the context of it. Please take 3 minutes and read through this carousel. There is so much disinformation about Israel being spread, and it is getting people hurt. There are videos from all over the world, including the US, of crowds of pro-Palestinian protesters attacking, beating, kicking, using pipes as weapons against Jews. It's horrifying. Attacks against Jews has increased 483% in the last 10 days. 86 attacks. Hamas is a terrorist organization whose sole purpose is to kill every Jew and destroy Israel. Most people living in Israel want peace. I know. I mean, there's so much.
And that's not true.
Not true at all. I pray for a 2-state solution. I pray for the killing to stop. But this is impossible as long as Hamas is allowed to continue its campaign to destroy Israel. Hamas must be defeated for the safety of everyone in the region, for the safety of Jews everywhere. Also, so that's basically saying I stand with the bombing civilian neighborhoods, right? Like I don't
We're
really
also
understand.
we're also reducing everything to Hamas.
Oh, of course.
You know,
I mean,
we have to remember that, you know, we're talking about a 125-year colonial venture of Zionism. Hamas is maybe 25, 30 years old. So what does it mean? Before that, 1948 is because of Hamas?
Right. I mean, to be fair, it's not like if we said this to her, she'd have any idea what you were talking about. But yes, just so people know. But I mean, I'm just saying, like, this whole thing about like they must be stopped or like stop, like it's not like people in the United States are walking around. It's not like politicians. Whenever people talk about Hamas, I'm like, okay, great. Let me know when the U.S. government starts funding them, training them, and bragging about their special relationship with them. Like, who are you? What? Like, who are you speaking truth to power to when you say Hamas is bad or what? But the weird thing is, like, they must be stopped. It's not weird, actually. They're just basically they're just justifying and standing behind ethnic cleansing, or we don't have to call it ethnic cleansing. It's just just massacring civilians. That's what they're doing. They're trying to sanitize and make what's really settler colonialism, which again, Debra Messing doesn't know what that is, but like they're trying to make bombing buildings look like responding to an existential threat. And they know that people on the left are shifting. And so you have to be pretty desperate to put your hopes into PR from Debra Messing. But
you know, Israel is instrumentalizing. Instrumentalizes the Palestinians. You know, that's the problem because, you know, we talked about it before. I mean, Israel would never deal with the Palestinian Authority. It would never deal with 90 some percent of the Palestinians. It would never deal with their issues, with the liberation, with the ethnic cleansing, with land issues, with all that stuff. So what they did is they pushed and pushed and pushed Hamas and resistance. You know, they left Palestinians in a corner with nothing to do except resist in a religious kind of a way almost. So they made Hamas into the Palestinians, and that's the incidental. Because then you take the most extreme Islamic fundamentalism and push it into a corner and make its military wing dominant, and then you characterize the Palestinians as them. You see, that's where Israel has instrumentalized the Palestinians. It's created in our minds how it wants us to imagine Palestinians, which is Hamas. And then it gave a word to it, Hamas. And that's what's happened. Yeah. All Palestinians have been reduced to Hamas.
Right. Yeah. Even, again, it's so funny. Israelis will admit to all of this, even right-wing Israelis. They're like, we founded this nation through terrorism. Right. Yeah, Hamas, we created Hamas. But whatever, Messing. I mean, again, as I tweeted, I almost feel bad talking to her like she's an adult. But so please read the carousel, get informed, share it widely. Disinformation is gas on the fire of anti-Semitism, and it is everyone's responsibility not to amplify disinformation on social media. It hurts. If you're an ally, please act like an ally. We need you. So again, this is a very conscious thing. They're aware. They're trying to make it look like people who side with Palestinians in this are perpetuating anti-Semitism, and they're trying to actually speak to people who in good faith are going to be afraid of that. And it's so disgusting because just like Ben Gurion, these people are weaponizing anti-Semitism and they care way more about Zionism than they care about anti-Semitism, which is why you have Netanyahu being buddy-buddy with, Orban and in Hungary and the Polish guy, even when they basically say that like the Holocaust, that Poland did not, they tried to pass a law saying Poland it was not responsible for the Holocaust at all.
That's right. No, Israel, I think it puts the Jews in real jeopardy.
They are an existential anti-Semitic threat.
Right. Because, Jews had always been the odd man out. They didn't fit in anybody's country. They didn't fit within laws, the legal system, religious systems, and so they were always the ones that got persecuted, basically. What happened was, part of the process was after World War II and the Holocaust and so on, you had a process of the whole world of human rights starts to open up. And people don't know this. Jews don't know this. But the hero, the Thomas Jefferson of the world of human rights was, who wrote the Universal Declaration of Human Rights?
No.
René Cassin. René Cassin, Cassins, was a French jurist, a Jewish French jurist, And he was the Thomas Jefferson of the world of human rights. He was one of the framers of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, of the Geneva Conventions. He worked very closely with Eleanor Roosevelt to get all these things through with the Jewish community. Ironically, it was the American Jewish community that's so rapidly pro-Israel today that was in favor of human rights and the Geneva Conventions and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that governments didn't want to accept. The Jews were on the right side of history on those days. And René Cassin, would always, he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1968, and he's buried, those that know the Paris, the Pantheon, which is the French temple of the heroes of the French Republic. Victor Hugo is buried in the Pantheon.
Wow. Rousseau
is buried there. Some of the great French figures, René Cassin is there as well.
Wow.
And René Cassin used to say that, human rights brings Jews under the umbrella. Now, anti-Semitism is a form of racism. And human rights deals with all forms of racism, including anti-Semitism. So what happened was that when Israel was created, of course, it was in the interest of Zionism, which dealt with illegal things, ethnic cleansing and colonialism at a time when colonialism was starting to phase out, had to work against international law. And then you had the occupation. So now you have the Fourth Geneva Convention that protects Palestinians living under occupation. Israel's violated every single item of the Fourth Geneva Convention. And why do they do it? Because we're an exception.
Yeah.
We had the Holocaust. It doesn't apply to us. We're special. So René Cassin used to say to the Jews, are you sure you want to be special again?
Wow.
Are you sure you want to step out from under the umbrella with everybody else, all the protections of human rights and international law, and now you want to be the exceptions? That's a double-edged sword. And so in order to protect Israeli policies like occupation and ethnic cleansing that are against international law, Israel is forcing the Jewish community to step outside of human rights, to violate or not to advocate for human rights, because human rights and Israel are at odds with each other, you see? And that's where Israel is losing the Jewish community. Mm-hmm. Because American Jews in particular, I think are defined by social justice and human rights. So you had Ron Dermer, who was the U.S. the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. during the Trump time for Netanyahu. He said last week, Israel has to forget American Jews. We've lost them. All we have left are evangelicals.
Right, yeah.
Right. And so I think Jews, to the degree that Jews see human rights as important for them as well as for the rest of humanity, have to stand against Israel. And that's you see, Israel's dilemma, is that you've got to link up now. Jews that always see themselves as liberals, at least, if not radicals,
right,
all of a sudden have to link up with evangelicals in order to support a country that violates human law, right, international law with impunity.
Right.
And I think that's putting Jews in a terrible position. And then Netanyahu gets up in the UN and says, we're attacking Gaza in the name of the Jewish people,
right,
not in the name of Israelis. This is a Jewish state, not the Israeli state. And so he creates that confusion. He blurs the boundaries between Jews and Israelis. So now you, Katie Halper, who are not Israeli, who never voted for Netanyahu, have been co-opted by him. He now represents you.
Yeah.
So now when you're out in the street, you go try to explain to your fellow Americans why what Israel is doing isn't your fault, or you're not the responsible. You see, what the American Jewish community has to do is get up and say, no, just what you said at the beginning of this program, not in my name.
Yeah.
If the American Jewish community doesn't do that, they can't be blamed for people confusing Israelis with Jews and attacking Jews, because that's the confusion that Israel is trying to push on people.
Right. And of course it's anti-Semitic, right? Because the conflating Jewish identity with unquestioning support of Israel is anti-Semitic. But yeah,
and
it's
you're right. Anti-Semitism has been weaponized.
Yeah. And I mean, all the stuff like Netanyahu's son posting a really alt-right anti-Semitic meme of George Soros. Was that which literally David Duke was like, welcome, exactly. Yair Netanyahu. Okay, yes, that's true. Palestinians and Arabs are Semites. Yes. I mean, we got to reinvent the wheel then, I guess. But I mean, I'm not sure that's like our biggest priority is redefining that term. But I guess it does speak to ironically to a connection that's often overlooked. Okay, so we got that one. Let's see what's next. And I did not know about Renee Kassan. It's interesting. Okay, so back to Deb. I mean, that is just so disgusting that the Hamas has to be defeated. Again, what are you saying? Like we're funding Hamas or something? I just don't get it. Okay. Again, it's just
they also don't get it. Hamas is willing to deal with Israel,
right?
But
Israel's,
it's not going to surrender.
Right.
I have a Palestinian friend that said to me, Israel won't even let us surrender. Hamas says, fine, okay, 2 states,
Right.
And you know what? The Palestinians say, keep some of the settlements, keep East Jerusalem, they're going down, and Israel won't even let them surrender. You just push, because Israel needs to beat them. It needs to defeat them. Without that, it just keeps going on forever. And if the Palestinians don't agree to be defeated, they'll be demonized and attacked forever.
Okay, next. So there are Palestinian Christians. What about Israeli Arab Palestinians? Are there Palestinian Jews? And then she responds, before Israel gave over control of the West Bank and Gaza to the Palestinians, there were 9.5% Palestinian Christians in the area. Under Palestinian Authority and Hamas's oppression, they shrunk to 1%. Meanwhile, Israel has 20% Arab Israeli citizens, Muslims and Christians. The PA said they won't let any Jews live in Palestine and do not recognize any Jew as Palestinian.
That's not true.
Okay. So,
It's a lie. I mean, sometimes, you could not distort the truth, just lie.
Right. So that's just not true.
That's just a lie.
What about the part about the PA?
Yeah.
The Palestinian Authority? Okay. Jews from the Middle East do not identify as Arab. This is really weird. Jews from the Middle East do not identify as Arab or Palestinian because they were never accepted as such. They go by Mizrahi Jews. So no Jews identify as Arab? How do they know this? Have they done a poll? Okay.
Well, I mean, there's a whole story there too, and that is that when Mizrahi is a new term.
Yeah,
they didn't call themselves Mizrahis; they called themselves what they were: Iraqi Jews, Yemenite Jews, Egyptian Jews. 100 years ago, there was no such thing as Mizrahi. As a matter of fact, 20 years ago, there was no such thing as Mizrahi. We used to sort of say Edot Mizrach, which are Jews from the East, Oriental Jews. But they used to call themselves, if you're coming from Yemen, you don't call yourself Arab necessarily. You call yourself Yemenite. You call yourself Syrian. You call yourself, and that's what they call themselves.
Right.
Iraqi Jews. I mean, you have a museum of Iraqi Jews in Lud. You've got the museums of Sephardi Jews. That they call themselves by the names of their communities.
Right.
And it was the Ashkenazi Jews, you see, that basically said to the Mizrahi, and that's why you had the Black Panthers, and that's why you had that reaction that you had among the Mizrahi Jews. The Ashkenazi said to them, we will accept you as Israelis. We will integrate you into Israeli life on condition that you give up your Arab identities. You can't be Arabs and Israelis. You can't be Arab Jews. And there was a whole process in the 50s that they're still paying the price for of deculturalization. And they destroyed their ethnic identities, their all the identities they had for thousands of years, and tried to make them into imitation Ashkenazi Jews, which they have to some degree. And there was tremendous reaction. That's why until today, Mizrahi Jews vote Likud. They would never vote for the Labour Party because they're still angry at what the
Wow.
Labour Party did to them in the 1950s. You hear that all the time. It's an open wound among Mizrahi Jews. So I think the fact that they were deculturalized, which is true. I mean, today they don't see themselves as Arab Jews. On the contrary, a lot of them walk around with big stars of David because they look a little bit Arab.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
And
It's
the
like
problem,
indistinguishable.
you know, and that's a problem. You know. So
Right.
so I think you know, that's what's happened to them is that they went through this process, and now the young generation doesn't know Arabic, is alienated from Arabs in general, and as they became Israeli, they became more right wing, and you know, this the whole idea that you have to be anti-Arab because Zionism is basically anti-Arab,
Right.
it's trying to make the country Jewish and de-Arabize the country.
Right.
So if you're going to de-Arabize the Palestinians, you have to de-Arabize the Jews as well.
Yeah.
Israel
Israel has
processes.
yeah.
These people don't either.
Of
They
course,
don't
yeah.
know, or they can't
Or they
take into
obscure,
account
they
because they're
obscure, yeah.
threatening. They're
Yeah.
threatening to the narrative. You need a
Right.
clean, easy narrative.
Yeah.
We're the good guys. They're the bad guys. We were persecuted. Now we're you know, accepting of everyone. You know, black, white, binary. And the minute you bring up something historical or analytical or critical or whatever, and you break that binary narrative, it's useless for you now.
Yeah.
It has
Right.
to be simple and you
No
know.
nuance.
So in
Right.
many ways, structurally, they're incapable of dealing with complexities.
Right. I mean, because it would undermine, like you're saying, they're very kind of like what ethno
Not Hasbara.
nationalists. Right. Yeah.
Complex.
Right. It's interesting because Israel has such a weird relationship with the Ashkenazi Mizrahi identity because they're like a bunch of, I mean, the government, right, is like mostly Ashkenazi, but they try to you know, the Sabras, right, who are born there, they like want to be these bronze strapping men who work the earth, like the total rejection of Ashkenazi identity of being like learned and feeble, physically feeble.
I don't think anymore.
What?
People don't use the word Sabra much anymore.
Oh, well, I mean, just whatever. Like
but that was
I mean, but it was Israel was founded on a rejection. Yes, the new Jewish man, which was fun. Ironically, I mean, it's the worst of both worlds. They like took the most aggressive stuff that they kind of, I think, attributed to the you know, the Jew who was in Israel and not alienated from the land, you know, but then they are like discriminate against the actual people that they're trying to kind of ape. Okay, so we did that one. All right, so I mean, we can't keep track of the lies because it would be too much, but okay. But I heard that Israel is an empire that colonized Arab land. First of all, no one says, I mean, they talk about settler colonialism and maybe how Israel is like part of, you know, it's like the outpost for the United States. It was the outpost for Europe, like for England and the US. But people don't really talk about imperialism with Israel. That's not even a thing. It's settler colonialism. But they're trying to
colonize. It did colonize an Arab country. That's right.
Yes. But here's why they're saying imperialism, empire, instead of, and because this makes
they're confusing classical
yeah.
colonialism with settler colonialism.
Right. Here's where it is. So I forgot to highlight this. So here's but I heard that Israel is an empire that colonized Arab land. And then the person responds, empires require a motherland, a place where the empire sends the goods they steal and where they bring the culture and language to oppress their colonial subjects like Britain and America or South Africa and British and Dutch. Israel is only 0.03 of the Middle East and the only Jewish state in the world. There are 57 Arab and Muslim countries in the Middle East that are part of the Arab Empire. What the fuck is the? Excuse me.
I don't know what that.
There's an Arab Empire. Israel is a national entity, while the Arab world is an imperial one. Who are the Arab world? Where's their home base that they're sending the goods to? They're stealing from where, and sending them where? I mean, these are such blatant lies. It's kind of incredible.
It's stupid. I mean, it's more than lies. It's just words.
I mean, part of it is stupid, like the Debra Messing people who put it out, but then it's cynical. And I think it is worth debunking, right? And it's good in a way that we get access to these clearly coordinated talking points.
But Israel is not an empire.
I know. I mean, literally, how is it?
But I wrote another book called War Against the People.
Yeah, I have that here.
in which I say that Israel serves the empire.
Right, which is different.
You see, and that's important because the occupied territory, we have to understand, is like a laboratory for Israel's perfection of high-tech military weaponry, surveillance equipment, technologies of repression. What happened in Gaza last week had nothing to do with security.
Right.
It was a military exercise in which Israel tested all kinds of military weaponry. And if you see, you look up the websites of all the Israeli arms manufacturers, they'll all say, buy our navigating systems. They were field tested in Gaza. Buy our drones. They were combat tested in Gaza. Gaza is a field laboratory for Israel to test, including American F-35s. You know, Israel is flying F-35s and bombing Palestinians before Americans are flying. The American Air Force is flying F-35s. Right. So that you got to understand that the occupation really serves Israel in terms of being this place where you can do anything you want to the Palestinians, develop your weaponry for export. And it's that weaponry for export that gives Israel the international status that it does, both with the US, but also, you know, all over the world. Why does China support Israel and India support Israel and Brazil support Israel, Nigeria support Israel? They're all getting, every country is getting some kind of military security assistance from Israel or technologies from Israel.
Yeah.
And from that point of view, Israel really serves the empire. Israel helps the corporations and the militaries and the capitalist countries, the global north, keep its hegemony over the global south, enforce its hegemony, and including the global south within your country, you know, the rich over the poor. You know, you have Israel, the Israeli police train the American police. Well, no,
right.
At Georgia State University in Atlanta, you've got what's called the Gilly Center, which is an Israeli center on the campus of Georgia State with a building that's the base for training the American police. And plus American police come here so that enforcing capitalist hegemony is true not just globally, but it's true in every country, whatever the different needs of that country. And that Israel does serve the empire. Israel isn't an empire, of course, it's a little country, but it's a very effective servant of the empire.
Yeah.
And it gets its just rewards.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. All right, let's see. So okay. Here's some more Hasbara. Okay.
Send it to me. It'd be interesting to write an article about it.
Yeah, well, yeah. So here's the skeptic again. I don't believe that Israel isn't a colonial empire. I've read so much about it from Instagram. Again, they're like totally trying to pathologize supporters. Like they're also projecting. That's where you get your historical sources, guys, but not the rest of the world. You can always tell an empire by language. Arabic is an imperial language like English and French, promoted through settler colonialism and imperial hegemony throughout the Middle Ages. Since the 20th century rise of Pan-Arabism, leaders advocated ethnic cleansing policies towards indigenous peoples, Kurds, Berbers, and Sudanese. They want to permanently reduce the status and power of indigenous religious groups, such as Jews, Copts, and Maronites across the region. This doesn't suddenly, they're paying like lip service to caring about human rights. This doesn't suddenly make every Israeli policy okay or minimize the death of Palestinians, but knowing history helps us move closer to peace.
That's right.
Right. Okay.
You should know Frank Luntz. Do you know Frank Luntz?
Yeah, Frank Luntz, the pollster, right?
He's a Republican pollster.
Yeah.
And he's the guy that did a whole dictionary of Hasbara.
Oh,
he's
really?
the guy that really developed the strategy of Israeli Hasbara. And part of his strategy, he says it very openly. You can look it up on the, it's on the internet, his whole thing, is don't come out to be against the Arabs. You have to come out, if you're going to explain Israel, sympathetic to Arabs, sympathetic to the suffering of the Palestinians, sympathetic to human rights.
Right.
And then within that framework, get in your due, you see?
Yeah.
So you can see very well how Frank Luntz is reflected in this kind of Hasbara.
Right. He also, I mean, no wonder he had to, he's the one who found out. He did those studies about liberal American Jews checking their Zionism at the door instead of for liberalism, instead of checking their liberalism at the door for Zionism, which is a phenomenon called PEP, Progressive Accept on Palestine.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
he's a really key to understanding
yeah, we
this.
should, yeah. He also looks a lot like a duck, which is neither here nor there. But okay. Let's see. Okay. What about the refugees? I heard Israel ethnically cleansed Palestinians. In Israel, the number of Palestinian Arabs increased since its foundation. In the Middle East, the Jews almost completely disappeared. Palestinian refugees, unlike any other group of refugees in the world, is a new term now describe any decadent, guys, you really need to proofread this, any decadent of Palestinians, even Bella and Gigi Hadid are defined as refugees because their father is a billionaire Palestinian. No, that's not why they're defined as refugees. Again, that is so dumb.
It's nonsense.
It's such mishigas. Yeah, it's so dumb. Oh, was I showing it? Okay.
But refugees, of course, is not a new term. The Palestinian refugees are the largest, from 48, are the largest refugee population in the world.
So stupid. Why do so many people spread these lies online then? Because people like you, this is so Israeli. It's such peak Israeli like framing. Because people like you know nothing about the conflict and resort to infographics on Instagram, including the one we are in, and then repeat those lies. Don't take my word for it. Research for yourself. Find out all the facts. Don't support what's popular because you want to feel good about yourself. That's stupid, love. You are better than this. You know better. Okay, this is turning into a very unhealthy dynamic. That stupid love. It's like abusive. What the hell? Also, the whole line about how it's complicated, you don't get it, you don't live there, we're in bomb shelters. As Norman Finkelstein says, would you rather live in a bomb shelter for 2 weeks than an open air prison for 15 years? And also that's just undermined by the fact that you have places, organizations like B'Tselem, people like you, who live there and are critical and acknowledge all this stuff. So that's just BS. Again, they try to guilt people.
Right. But you know what? Israel's losing it in the court of public opinion.
Right.
The thing we have to keep in mind is that Israel is not winning here. Israel is strong with governments for the reasons I said, because of its exports of military and security and surveillance. It is not strong with peoples of the world. And that's why it's so shrill. That's why it weaponizes anti-Semitism. That's why it tries to scare the Jews into supporting Israel and so on. It has no case. Right. And I think Peter Beinart is now writing about this a lot. Yeah. It's clear. I mean, Israel is losing. If Israel is losing American Jews,
forget it.
It's really lost everybody else. And I tell you something else. Israel's starting to lose the evangelicals too.
Really? Why?
Evangelical groups that are they're also beginning to understand. So, I think all this stuff, you can see this as hasbara, but I don't think you have to have the illusion that it's really being effective. It's effective among certain Hillel kids, maybe. Or some, I don't know among who. But I think overall, Israel is really losing it. And this is simply a desperate attempt to sort of claw its way out of the corner. But I think it shows more desperation. The very fact that you have to resort to hasbara and lies and this kind of stuff shows the degree to which, you're not in a very strong position.
All right, let's see. Whoops. We got some nice. All right. Let's see, share. Okay. Okay. All right. Back to the scholar. But I also heard this conflict isn't about religion and Hamas are freedom fighters defending Palestinians. Girl, you need to spend less time online believing everything you read. Hamas is a genocidal terrorist group that launched over 1,500 rockets on Israeli civilians last week and murdered several. Google Hamas charter and see what they say about Jews. Knowing how lazy you are, here's the quote. But as Max Blumenthal pointed out, they've updated their charter.
Yeah, they've thrown out their charter to a large degree. That's right. Okay. But also charters, and what does a charter mean? A charter is the way you look at the world, and you can look at the world in all kinds of ways. Yeah. The point is, what are your policies? What are you willing to do in the real world? And Hamas is willing to deal with Israel. And as a matter of fact, it does deal with Israel.
Well, Israel is willing to deal with Hamas, right?
We also remember that why Hamas was called a terrorist group.
Yeah.
I mean, Hamas was a group supported by Israel. I mean, it's really is Israel created Hamas. Became a terrorist group when they won they didn't really win the elections. They got 40%, but they became the dominant party in the Palestinian elections that Israel and the PA, Abbas, and the US didn't like. And that's when they were classified as a terrorist group. When they won the elections in a democratic election that even Jimmy Carter certified was democratically won. They won. And that's why they were called a terrorist group, in order to nullify the election. And then Gaza was put under a siege 15 years ago, 2006. So that's the background. It has nothing to do with Hamas's policies, with their ideology. There was a Hamas for a long time before 2006, for at least 15 years or so. Before that, they were active. Israel knew about them. Israel actually gave them money and so on, because it wanted to be a counterweight to Fatah and the PLO. So that it has nothing to do with that. It had to do with the fact that at a certain point, Israel wanted to neutralize them, and the best way to neutralize the Palestinian group is to call them terrorists. And of course, they had, and this is Condoleezza Rice.
Yeah, the birth pangs of a new democracy. That's
and then leading right into Obama. Obama played, and Biden played as much of a role as Bush or Rice did. So that you can't just blame Republicans for this. Democrats have been more guilty of this kind of manipulation than Republicans, actually.
Let's see. Okay, we're almost done with this painful. Thanks everyone for bearing with me. Let's see.
With me.
No, I'm asking you to respond to these. So how do we free Palestine? Well, the majority of Israelis support a Palestinian state besides Israel in the West Bank and Gaza, and you should support it too.
That's not true. Right. Who supports a Palestinian state in the West Bank? Maybe 20% of Israelis on a sunny day.
Right.
And even then, if you told them that means giving up Ma'ale Adumim, they'd say no. I mean, it's just ridiculous. They're just saying whatever they want to say. Right. There's no relationship to anything.
Reality.
That's why it's hard to argue with, because
there's
no facts here. There's no substance.
Yeah.
You can say anything you want to say.
Well, you're responding to it by showing the truth. So
the only way you can respond, that's the problem we have. See, these are sound bites.
Right.
Anybody can look at this. You read it in a second. You're reading it to the people without more, okay. And it's simple, and it's black and white, and etc. And it has a clear answer, and this is right and this is wrong, and that's it. When I'm responding to it, and I'm responding to it as briefly as I can, I have to get into whole lectures.
Right.
Because each of these lies, each of these words, Arab Empire, for example, each of these things require, what is a Mizrahi Jew, requires explanation, and you don't have that time in the media.
Right.
Most programs I'm on don't give me the time you're giving me.
Right. Yeah.
So we have to put in a sound bite,
right,
a complicated fact-based analysis versus a simplistic bunch of lies that Israel can just say.
Right.
So it isn't really a fair fight.
Right.
And we have to really have strategies of how do you do that. We call it reframing.
Yeah, reframing.
And we've worked very hard. By the way, my organization is the Israeli Committee Against House Domination.
I know. That's what I messed up. Yeah.
And we work very hard on reframing the conflict from a security framing that Israel tries to produce to more of a human rights,
right,
settler colonial framing that gives you a whole. Once you get the framing right and the logic, that's why this book is so important, if I have to say, because it gives you the political logic. Once you get the logic of it, as against the Zionist logic, then you can understand yourself all this stuff is nonsense that they're saying.
I forgot.
It's only if you don't have the alternative logic that you get caught up in. You don't know if what they're saying is true or not because you don't have a logic of your own.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I think did you guys send me that book yet? I can't remember.
I don't think.
Okay, I got to write to your publisher. Okay, so back to, we're almost done with this. And yeah, I mean, but I think it's just I think sometimes it's useful to show how incoherent and dishonest they are. So then you can dismiss everything else they do. Okay. Extreme nationalists on both sides try to claim Palestinians and Israelis don't deserve national rights. If you see someone opposing the basic human rights of either side or saying they don't exist, stay away.
Yeah.
They don't,
Israel says Palestinian human rights don't exist.
Yeah. And Palestine doesn't exist.
And they're saying the opposite.
Right. You're saying there are two sides who equally worthy of living in dignity and security? Then the woman goes, this is what my therapist calls a breakthrough. Palestinians and Israelis both deserve safety, liberation, freedom, and justice. They have an interesting way, the Israelis, of showing that.
See, that's the Frank Luntz thing.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like the two-state thing. It's like, what does that mean? It's just...
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we're done with this weird, abusive relationship display. But
send it to me.
I will, yeah.
I'll write a tome.
Yeah. And then the last thing I wanted to just review is, did you see this clip of what is her name? Hold on. Ruth something, this Yiddish scholar. And by the way, for people
Weiss,
yeah. By the way, for people who don't understand, like the Ashkenazi thing, basically think of Ashkenazi as like all this. Well, it sounds problematic. All this, like Einstein, Chomsky, Freud,
European.
All of these guys are, they're European. So like all the stereotypes or like the things that I will say like lovingly about Jewish stuff, it's almost always applied to Ashkenazic. Larry David, but okay. So let me just look at this. Ruth, what is it? Wise? Not so wise.
Yeah. Wise.
This is an amazing video.
She's at Harvard.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw this.
Dershowitz.
Oh my God, the Dersh. Hold on. Does anyone have that video of her like talking about how Jews have to defend Israel? It was on the internet. It was going a little viral. Hold on.
Yeah, she's famous for that. I mean, you get these mouthpieces, you know.
It's like diaspora Jews. Look at this. Hold on.
But they don't have much traction. I mean, we can take comfort in that, I think. And you can see that the last week.
Oh, here it is. I found it. Fellow diaspora Jews, please watch this from Isaac de Castro. Okay, let me show this. Again, it's just useful to see, to tap into their Hasbara, their talking points. Okay. And then, sorry guys, trigger warning. This woman's pretty unpleasant. And then also the irony is, well, we'll talk about this at the end. What a sellout this person is if she cares about Jewish culture. I mean, Yiddish culture. Okay.
Yeah.
And you will say, what? You want us to make you look good? That's not my job. Your job is to make us look good.
That's Israeli.
Our job is not to make you look good, American Jews. What do you have to worry about? Your job is to make us look good. And here's how you do it. Every one of us has to serve 3 years in the army, 2 years in the army, some of us 5 years, and then for the rest of our lives, you have got to serve 2 or 3 years in the army of words. You've got to learn to fight the political battle, which is even more important at this point than the military battle. We'll fight the military battle. We're not asking you necessarily to come and be lone soldiers, although some of you can. You've got to learn how to fight back on the campuses, how to make the arguments. Now they keep shifting. You know, the ground keeps shifting under us. They keep changing language. Intersectionality wasn't even a word 10 years ago. Now suddenly it's intersectionality. You've got to stay on top of it. And you know how we train for the army? We don't train for defensive warfare. If the war against Israel ever had to be fought on Israeli soil, do I have to tell you? It's an impossibility. So it's the same thing. Don't let the war of words ever be fought about Israel's nature. Let it be fought about why you can't accept Israel, why you have to single out this tiny people. Try to find Israel on the map. It's hardly there. You know, we used to play this game, Where's Waldo? Where is Waldo on the map? Are you going to really tell me that this is the country you want to blame? Push them, teach them how to defend by attacking. Teach them really what one says as in fencing. You've got to make demands on them. They've got to serve for 3 years in the army of words.
No, what do you mean? No, the army. We are.
Well, I cannot even start with this.
Is that who is that guy? Is that the guy who's like
compete with this passion and compassion, and of course.
Compassion? Is that the guy who like was replaced by?
This is Sharansky.
Avigor Lieberman?
No, this is Sharansky.
Who's that? No, I know, but isn't he the guy who was like in the same party as Lieberman?
He was originally.
Yeah.
Sharansky's a real sellout because, you know, he was a prisoner of conscience in the Soviet Union.
Oh, yeah.
And very close to Sakharov. Sakharov was the main human rights defender, you know, in the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And everybody, including me, I mean, American Jews fought very much to get Sharansky released as a prisoner of Zion. And he got released, and he came to Israel and became a super xenophobic right-wing guy who violated every concept of human rights. You know, again, he was the greatest example. If you want the example that Renee Cassette brings up of Jews who understand human rights, but who want to step outside and say, well, it doesn't apply to us because we're special, that's Sharansky. A terrible guy.
Wow.
You know,
yeah.
He really betrayed the whole Sakharov and the whole world of human rights. All the people that supported him, he betrayed.
Yeah.
You know, by becoming a right-wing racist. Basically.
He owes you guys a lot of time back. You wasted hours on him. Just kidding. Okay, so yeah, that's and what's so interesting is that, like, again, this woman's dedicated. She's like a Yiddish culture professor. How are you going to defend this country that that threw Yiddish under the bus for Hebrew?
You know, it was illegal in the early years of Israel to speak Yiddish.
Jesus Christ. No,
it was the only country in the world where Jews could be arrested for performing in Yiddish.
That's amazing. Again, it's like the anti-Semitism is stronger than the Zionism is a bigger priority than stopping anti-Semitism. That's right. Someone was telling me that famous boat...
because Zionism was anti-Jewish.
Right.
It was anti-Jewish, and it still is anti-Jewish.
It still is, yeah. Well,
there's so much Jewish to be defined by Zionism.
Right. Yeah, and it puts Jews in danger. It does, right. And also I didn't know this, that famous boat that FDR turned around. They want some like Zionists pressured him to turn it around also.
Yeah, the Struma.
Because they wanted people to have to go. Yeah. Oh, this is another talking point that's pretty common. Remember, the problem could also be solved by Palestine-Egypt relations. So it's like, oh, Egypt is worse on Palestine. Their blockade is worse. Or they'll say none of the Arab countries want them, as if that makes it's not really relevant.
Well, I mean, the problem is that there's an alienation between the governments and the people in those countries. I mean, the Egyptian government does not represent the Egyptian people. There are a lot of dictators and autocrats in the Arab world that run the Arab world that are in bed with Israel and the United States and Trump and everybody else. And but that doesn't apply to the Arab peoples, for whom the Palestinians are very important.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, this has been great. People want recommendations of books. First of all of Jeff's books. Anything else that you recommend?
Well, there's a number of books. I mean, there's a new book by Nora Harakat. I really recommend.
Oh, yeah. Justice for Some. Is that
Justice for Some.
Yeah, I got to get that. Yeah.
About erasing Palestinians, using international law to erase Palestinians. My book is Decolonizing Israel, Liberating Palestine. That's one book. Another book is War Against the People, about the Israeli arms industry. Ilan Pape's book, of course, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. Avi Shlaim, who's another Israeli historian. Shlaim, who has a book called The Iron Wall, about Israel's relations to the Arab world over the years.
What's it called? I mean, I know. How do you spell his last name? I know he is, but how do you spell it?
Shlaim. Shlaim. Right.
Oh, Shlaim.
IAM, I think.
Yeah, and it's what is it? The Iron
Wall, and he's an Iraqi Jew.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So he's writing his biography now, autobiography, which should be interesting. I mean, Norman Stillman is another scholar that deals with Mizrahi Jews. If people are interested in looking into that, I think he's got a book called Jews from Arab Lands, something like that.
Jeff
So,
Tel Yair,
yeah.
thanks for turning me on to At the Drive-In back in 2003. We hung out at Diwan in West Jerusalem one night. Who's
Okay.
Yair?
Abu Haram. Yair is my son.
Oh, okay. Do you name him after Netanyahu's son? Just kidding.
Yeah, no.
Or Bolsonaro's son?
Yair
Just
too.
kidding. Yeah. Any online pod program? Sign me up.
All right. Neve Gordon has a book on occupation.
How do you spell his name?
Neve Gordon, Gordon. He has several good books on occupation and also on the Israeli surveillance industry and so on. I mean, there's a lot of books. You know, we have in East Jerusalem what's called the Educational Bookshop.
Oh, wow.
Which is from the floor to the ceiling.
Is that where you're in front of right now? Is that where you are now?
No,
Okay.
I'm at home in my study, but
Right.
the Educated Bookstore is filled with books on Palestine. It's not that there's a lack of things to
Right.
read.
Yeah.
And of course, a lot of Palestinian, writers as well that we always have to mention.
Yeah. Nura, but they're, what about Diane Batu?
Diane Butu.
Butu, sorry, yeah.
Diana Butu.
Has she written books or she's written
No,
really,
she has certain articles.
yeah, really fascinating stuff, yeah.
Some of the young Palestinian intellectuals, there's a website called Al-Shabaka, which is like a think tank, but it's online, articles and thoughts of young Palestinian intellectuals, which people should, could look at if they're interested in what young intellectual Palestinians are thinking these days.
How do you spell that?
Al-A-L and then Shabaka, Shabaka.
Shabaka.
Shabaka, right.
Al-Shabaka, okay.
Right.
Also, what Omar Barghouti, he wrote the
Omar
BDS.
has less books. He has a couple books.
Yeah, he only has one, I think, or not as many, yeah.
Well, Ali Abu Nima, of course, as you mentioned.
Oh, Ali Abu Nima, yeah, he's been on the show a bunch, yeah. And he's written 2 books, right?
Right.
I'll put his name in there. All right, great. Jeff, thank you so much for this.
All right, thanks for having me on.
Everyone check out his website. What is it? Your website?
My website?
Yeah. Oh, I put one thing campaign down.
ICAHD, ICAHD, the Israeli Committee.
I know, not the International Coalition, as I said, against housing. Okay, ICAHD, what is it?
ICAHD.org.
Israeli Coalition Against Housing Demolition, right?
Against house demolitions.
Okay, cool. I know what Al is. I know Al is a definite article. Yeah. All right, I'll take some questions. I'll stay on this. I really appreciate this, Jeff.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
and we'll
you.
do it again.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Are you coming to the States anytime soon?
When I can.
Okay. Yeah. How do you say who knows in Hebrew?
How do you say that?
Yeah.
Matai sheni ochol.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
With an American accent.
Do you have an American accent?
Yeah.
People, yeah. But it's funny because you say in Hebrew.
I guess
Edward Said on Orientalism. Yeah. Yeah. It's the filler word instead of
yeah.
Who's Mandy Kahan? Anyway, do you know that person?
I'm not sure.
All right. Okay. Oh, wait, last thing for you. Sorry. Tell us about you got arrested in the only democracy in the Middle East for BDS materials? Yeah.
I get arrested occasionally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was giving a tour in the Malay Adumim settlement. And in Malay Adumim, we're looking over Jerusalem, and I talk about BDS. And and then the tour was over. As a group from the UK. And they got on their bus and left, and I decided I'm going to go home on the public bus. So I got on the public bus. The police came, stopped the bus, took me off, and arrested me for BDSing. I don't know.
Yeah.
And now I have a secret weapon. That is, I have another son whose name is Ishai, who's the editor of the English language website of Haaretz.
Oh, wow.
Which, by the way, if you want a great source of information, Read Haaretz in English.
Yeah. Okay.
You need a
Haaretz.
subscription, but it's worth it.
I know
That's
it's
really
annoying. Can you? What's that son's name?
Yishai.
Yishai.
Halper.
Let's see
He's
if we
the
can. Maybe
editor of
from
the
one
website.
helper to another, he can give me a free thingy.
So I got arrested in this. I just call Yishai.
Did you say? Do you know who my son is?
So that got a lot of publicity, and
Right.
they let me go. I mean, there was nothing illegal to it, and in fact, they got really reprimanded by the Justice Department because it's not illegal to talk about BDS,
Right.
but it created a whole. In other words, it's all grist for the mill.
Yeah.
And if you're an activist, you have to really understand not just when you get into trouble. Okay, that's part of what you do, but how do you leverage that into more publicity, into more, and every arrest and every hassle, shouldn't just end there. It should become very, very public.
Right.
And that's part of the strategy of our Hasbara.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, our Hasbara. Yeah, it's only illegal to BDS in the U.S. It's true, as we know from Abby Martin.
Right.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeff.
All right.
Speak soon.
Thank you, Katie.
Bye.
And thank you all the people listening.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay. Talk soon.
Okay. Great. Yes.
Bye.
Bye. All right. Let me.
I don't know how I get off.
I'll do this. I know. I'll kick from studio there. Wait. No. How do I? Oh, I'll just unselect you. Okay. All right, guys. That was great, right? Oh, yeah. Yeah, we did. Yumna mentioned that the New York Times. It's not. Is it New York Times person? I think the whole New York Times office is in a place that used to be. Someone can correct me, but that used to be inhabited by Palestinians. Anyway, yeah. So this is my early stream today. I'm still not in New York City. I should go back, but because I'm still not in New York City, I just stream all the time. That was beyond great. Thank you. Yeah, that was good, right? So I'll have to figure it out. I'll either, you guys, I got to push the Patreon a little bit. Come on. All this free stuff, patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. What did you say, Katie? Well, I'm not going to read it because it's not nice. What you saw was excellent. Are you Jewish, person who said that? What I saw was excellent. David, hi, you're regular. David Lehrfeld, are you Jewish? I'm just curious. Because it's very what I saw was excellent. Okay. Why would I go back? Well, it's safe now in New York City, right? Do you know why Peter Beinart came out supporting one state solution, New York Times, roughly a year ago? I don't know. Is that a trick question? Thank you for super sticker. I'm a non-Jewish binary human and enjoyed it from an American perspective. There you go. Yeah, Jack's been streaming a lot. I gotta get him back in. Let's see. You should give me a review. Eagle Hawk Condor. All right, let's see. Anything else? He changed position, came forward supporting one state. Not a trick question. Yeah, I thought that was impressive. I know you weren't trying to be mean. That's funny. Yeah. Disclosed location. Yeah, I can't tell people where I am. I didn't realize that until someone was like, "Don't say that." Katie Halper, how would you recommend that we can spread the truth when so many people will instantly use the BS anti-Semitism brand? How do you manage to get where you are? I mean, I think honestly, you should just say, I stand, like I keep saying this, which is that I know it's probably, oh, wait, your first watch got, you know what you need to do then, Down with Apartheid Israel, you got to hit, and everyone needs to do this, hit subscribe, and because you don't want to miss these streams, right? So you hit subscribe, you do subscribe and then the bell, okay? And then you'll know about them. What, Katie, what fact? Katie, that's true. Chris Hedges just mentions that same fact too. Which fact? My point was that, like, the whole argument about, well, two things, right? I have a couple points. One is that it's anti-Semitic to equate Jewish identity with blind support of Israel. And the other point that I make is, you know, the whole argument about you're not here, it's complicated. It's not really complicated from a human rights like an international human rights perspective, for one. And it's like if you have Israelis and you have hold on one second. I don't usually stream at this time, so I don't usually overlap with George Galloway. Okay, let me focus. If you have Israeli organizations like Bethlehem saying that Israel is an apartheid state, then that's it. That whole argument about it being like, you know, Israelis you don't know what it's like to be Israeli. It's like, okay, I don't know what it's like to be Israeli, and I'll stand with Bethlehem. They do know what it's like to be Israeli because they are Israeli. What's this? I'm telling you, hit the like button and didn't get notified. Just happened to see the stream on my sub list. Yeah, I don't know. Well, usually it's evenings on 7 p.m. on Thursdays and Sundays, but I've been doing extra streams. Have Miko Paulette on, Rashid Khalidi. Oh yeah, I love you, Katie. Thank you, Mr. 13FNG. Katie, Joe Sacco would be a cool guest in promoting his graphic novels about Palestine. One of Chris Hedges might be cultural enriching for viewers. Okay, Joe Sacco, I'll write that down. Who said the thing about what is the thing about what's the Chris Hedges thing? Can someone tell me who's the person who wrote that in there, that he mentions this fact? Anyone? Anyone? Can anyone? Where is that? I'm not in New Rochelle. I'm over 2 hours from the city. Anyone know? All right. Wait, it's coming soon. So that's my question. That's my suggestion about how to. Okay, what's the fact here? Who wrote that? Mr. 13FNG. Can you tell me what the fact is? Because I'm just curious. All right, these are hurting my ears. I need better headphones that don't do this. All right, I guess I'll never know. Oh, wait, what's the Chris Hedges thing? I'll never know. What's the fact? Oh my God. Yeah, what is the fact? Can anyone figure it out? Oh, he says that. Wait, no. Is this true? Does he really say Jeff is my dad? Come on. Okay, I don't know what you guys are saying. Oh, I think he was talking about Washington Post bureau chief living in Palestinian Clinton's apartment. Got it. Yes, actually, that's true. Katie Halper, have you noticed the coordinated campaign to change the narrative to supposed anti-Semitic confrontations and slogans over the past couple of days? Yes. In fact, I'm going to have a guest on to talk about that. Yeah, I agree that that Long Island. Well, okay. All right, cool. Thank you guys. True overhead, yeah. Who's Ryan Dawson? Everyone keeps asking about this person. I have no idea who he is. I'm gonna have a great. Yeah, I have noticed that. All righty. Israelis don't know what it's like to be Palestinian is the problem. Actually, yeah, I meant to play this while Yumna was on. Where is it? She posted something good. I mean, oh, where's humanity? Because I promised that I would play this and I didn't. So let me do that. But first, here, I'll show this video. Oh, Sana Seed. Yes, I need to have Sana Seed on. Let's see. 1 second, guys. Who's Dua Lipa? Who's Dua Lipa? Anyone know? Sorry, it's like embarrassing. She has. Oh, yeah. One second. Okay, here. This is painful. Who made this TikTok? Did you? All right, let me show you this.
What they're experiencing.
Whoops. All right. She's Albanian, but what does she do? Yeah, again, I mean, I literally put that in my bio today that we're not related. Not that not that there's anything wrong. Wait, but what did Dua Lipa do? Did she do something with oh, and who called them anti-Semites? I'll have to make a list of them to, redeem. Okay, what was I looking for? Oh, okay. Everyone follow Yumna if you're not already. Yeah, I'll try to have him on. Okay, I will try to have Roger Stone on. Okay.
Talk to two 10-year-olds about what they're experiencing, one Israeli and one Palestinian. Nadine Abdeltaif has become the face of Gaza's children.
I'm only 10.
After going viral in this video posted online. CBS News met Nadine near her neighborhood, which is now in ruins.
I want to feel safe for one day at least. I never feel safe in my own home.
What's it like in your house?
It's very scary.
Renana Botzer-Swizza lives in southern Israel, just a few miles away from Gaza. She gets scared every time Hamas rockets are fired near her home. She says she knows what she experiences is nothing compared to what Nadine does. And when we asked her what she'd say to her if they were to ever meet,
I wasn't saying nothing. I just hug her and tell her that I know what she feels.
I thought it said that she didn't understand what she felt.
talk to two 10-year-olds about what they're experiencing.
Anyway,
One
so then
Israeli and one
Yuma writes, hold on. Yuma writes, maybe they'll meet at a military checkpoint if Nadine even gets to leave Gaza when Renana turns 18 and becomes a soldier occupying Nadine's land, or when in 8 years Renana is in the Air Force and calls Nadine to let her know her house is going to be bombed again. Yeah, this is awful. This video of let me just show this. What's her name? Nadine, right? Let's see. This is an awful video, but everyone should watch this. Hold on. I keep thinking this keyboard in front of me is Nadine Gaza. Okay, here. This is just. Hold on. Videos.
We cry every day.
Okay, hold on. We don't need the music though. Let's see. This again, if she were Israeli, this would be all over the media. Okay, hold on. Oh, I'm already sharing it. Did you guys hear the audio? Hold on.
I'm always sick. I don't know. I can't do anything. See all of this. What do you expect me to do? Fix it? I'm only 10. I can't even do anything anymore. I just want to be a doctor or anything to help my people, but I can't. I'm just a kid. I don't even know what to do. I get scared. that much. I do anything for my people, but I don't know what to do. I'm just 10. I'm just 10. All of this, when I see it, I literally cry every day, saying to myself, why do we deserve this? What did we do to this? My family said they just hate us. They just don't like us because we are Muslims. Why does Muslims act for you like that? You see all of the kids around me? They're just kids. Why wouldn't you just send a missile to them and kill them? It's not fair. It's not fair.
Yeah. I mean, it's like overwhelming. It's heartbreaking. And also there have been all these kids who were like in trauma programs that were killed. Like all these organizations that did stuff for like working with kids and helping them, trying to help them with trauma. Can you imagine you work like, just imagine that. And all these other things of like people who were featured in like, you know, they were persecuted by the Israeli military, you know, like locked up for whatever reason. As Ali Abunimah points out, I think Israel's like the only country that, I should look this up. Ali Abunimah. Well, hold on. Israel, it's like the only country that, fuck. Let me see. Let me see if he's up. I don't know. It's like the only country that like, it's not that tries kids because, the U.S. does that too. They lock up kids as adults. Is that what it is? Yeah. Does anyone have any footage of this? Of the continued harassment? Also, there's this video of hold on. What is it? Hold on. Oh, hold on. They're with a fishbowl. They have their fishbowl. Palestine. What is it? Gaza. Fish. Right. Anyone watching speak Arabic? Hold on. All these things really need to be subtitled. I mean, what am I like? Yeah, obviously people have. They saved their fish. All I know is they saved their fish. Hold on. Oh, I found a subtitled one. This is also heartbreaking. And this isn't like tragedy porn. It's just that I think it's important to show these things because Palestinians are so dehumanized. Oh, you do? Okay. I found a, obviously. Okay. And it's like, I mean, it is, I'm not romanticizing it at all, but it is like incredible how resilient people are. And I keep saying this, I'll probably get arrested for saying this. And I'm not saying this to sound tough or like, ooh, daring point, but I really am surprised that there isn't more. I mean, I don't know how people deal with this without engaging in certain behavior that's illegal. Okay. That's not a call for anything. I'm just saying that it legit surprises me. That's what I'm saying. I'm not just saying that also to not get in trouble. That's my real thoughts. Okay. Let me make sure I have the audio on for this.
أنقذناها من الضعف والحين الأطفال بالنار.
So cute, that girl. Oh, I didn't know that they talk about resilience. She looks a lot like my mom did as a little kid.
أنقذناها من الضعف
So cute. Anyway, that's kind of amazing. Someone pointed out, and it's true actually, someone should make this a side by side. Does anyone notice how much oh, this is nice. This is so nice. Katie, I think you authentically have the most progressive, morally, and humane approach to the issue. You do this by including humanitarianism. Thanks. What was I just saying? No, I hadn't seen that video when I said the resilience thing for real. I hadn't seen it. So, half of Gaza is kids. Yeah, it's awful. I mean, okay, Brad just sent me something. This is okay. Yeah, this is pretty amazing. Hold on. I wonder if we could side by side it, and we could in a couple minutes. But for now, I'm just going to show it. Hold on. Can you screen grab the? How do I do this? How do I upload this? Someone needs to do a thing, a side by side of. Oh, I know what I'll do. I know what I can do. I know what I can do. Check out the 4-part expose on the Israel lobby in America at the Electronic Intifada, Al Jazeera, FB, and YouTube had to take it down thanks to Israel. Right. I know what this is. I know what I can do. Here. Hold on. I download the thingy and then I drag it into a window. That's what I do. Hold on. Okay. I export it. You know what? I should just do it right now and preview. Hold on. I mean, this is really good, but it's fun. I mean, this doesn't even capture their resemblance, but hold on 1 second, because there are other shots of her. It does, but sorry, I sound like such a complainer. Hold on. All right. If I had more time, I'd do something really nice in Canva or something, but. One second. Thanks again. Crap. Thank you to Brad for this. It is actually pretty stunning, the resemblance. You'll see what I'm talking about in 1 second. I learned this really cool trick that people probably know, which is that you can just drag an image, hopefully I'm right, into a window, like a Chrome window, and it just becomes like a URL. Hold on. Export. Okay. Excuse me. Let me see. Is this how you do it? Okay, yeah. So this is a side-by-side of Nadine and Anne Frank that I think Humanities or Chomsky video. This one too, yeah. Yeah, Humanity requested it. I'd see here, he or she here. No, right? Yeah, I just need to wear headphones that are little and fit in the ear. Here's another one. Here's another one. Again, thanks to Brad. Yeah. Yeah. So thanks to Humanity for that. And I don't know what this, I'm not going to respond to something about what is it? Yeah, that's Anne Frank and Nadine from Gaza. So we in the Western media world have to speak English speaking Palestinian. Oh yeah, does anyone have oh, that's very nice of you. I hope you know what an essential job you're doing and the difference you're making. Thank you. People watching will remember these facts you were sharing for the rest of their lives and tell others. That's very nice. Tweet what out? I will tweet this out. What was I going to say? Oh, does anyone have any Twitter of any image? Sorry. Does anyone have any footage of any links to footage, any tweets that show Al-Aqsa stuff? Let me look for it. What's today's date? It's no, it's the late. Oh, let's see. Okay, this is from Sunday. Oh, I have to have it. It's Omar. Gotta have him on back on from IMEU. Okay. So this is recent. This is from a very good resource. Everyone should be following, Middle East Eye, and then IMEU should be following too. All right. Israeli settlers flanked by security forces stormed the courtyards of Al-Aqsa on Sunday. Earlier, Israeli police reportedly arrested at least 6 Palestinian worshippers. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry condemned the move, saying it was aimed at provoking worshippers. Yeah. Okay. Jesus Christ. I realized in case we do turn this into audio only, I'll read out loud what it says. A group of Israeli settlers flanked by armed Israeli security forces stormed the courtyards of Al-Aqsa Mosque on Sunday. Earlier, Israeli police reportedly attacked Palestinian worshippers. arresting 6 of them according to local media. Oh my God. Oh, they were kneeling on that guy's head, by the way. Very George Floyd. Derek Chauvin. Wow. Fuck. Worshippers under the age of 45 were also reportedly prevented from entering the mosque amid tightened security measures at the gates. The Christian Islamic Organization for Support of Jerusalem said this reflects, quote, Israel's insistence, end quote, on violating the sanctity of the mosque and chapels and its insistence on increasing tension in the city. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry said the actions of the settlers were aimed at provoking worshippers and showed a disregard for efforts made to establish calm. Since 2003, Israel has allowed settlers into Al-Aqsa Mosque complex under the protection of Israeli security forces, overriding the authority of the Islamic Endowment Department. All right, that's nice. Pretty on brand. All right. Anyway, I think this was, let's see, Joanne Nayeri. The Jewish people showed the same resilience as Palestinians when they were persecuted by the fascists. No, I did not see this. Katie, you should watch the pro-Palestinian, pro-Israeli rallies in Canada where the thick accented pro-Israeli told the pro-Palestinians to go back to Palestine. Right. But I thought that country doesn't exist. Cody Wolfchild says, as American Indians, we know we can't fight back with rockets like Hamas, but the same American attitude that condemns Hamas's military keeps our eyes off why we won't let natives sue for land title. Anyway. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for watching. My Mondo Weiss description. Okay, I'll fix that. But thanks for watching. Guys, make sure you subscribe, share, like the stream. That's so easy. And what else? Please consider becoming Patreon supporters. And in fact, let me read the Patreon supporters I got so far. Okay, cool. So I want to thank Nazil. I want to thank Sunny Days kind of. And I want to thank James. I want to thank Andrew. Yeah. What else? Who else? Let's see. Guys, you have the chance if you want. I can read your names on screen. Okay, I want to thank if you donate now. I want to thank James B. I want to thank Duncan. I want to thank Andrew J. I want to thank Catherine. I want to thank Douglas. I want to thank Nabil. I want to thank Colton, Yuri, Omar, Sung, Philip, Fancy, Callie, M, Jack, Sephora, Awise, David S, Schiabo Comandante, Tony S for upping it, Gabriel Ross, oops, I try not to, Ann P, Sam E, where's the new? Sarah B, Billy, Jean, Carl, Fawad, Eb, Casey, Spencer, David. These aren't all from today. These are from last week. Asim, Cinema, I'm not gonna unthank people who edited down. Drew C. Corey P. Ken A. Johnny S. for upping it. Suzanne. Stefan. Kathy Lewis for the upgrade. Excuse me. Goalie. Austin. Jen. I'm going back to early May. William J. Michael W. Liam. Did I do these already? I think maybe I did. Fetish Magic. Jonathan B. Muhammad E. Yeah, I did these before. So everyone, thank you so much. And yeah. Whoa, thank you, Landrew, for this very kind donation. Wow. Let me see. Thank you, Frodo, for the super sticker. Thank you. Look at that. Wow, I really appreciate that, Landrew. Big time. Let's see. Katie and all Eddie77 is the #1 Instagram account for the latest reports on the ground. He's always on. Okay, I'll show that stuff. Let's see if I got any right now. Oh man, I want one more. That's too much pressure. Anyway, I got a Pet It Go. I got an email from Dig. I don't even know why I did. It says Pet It Go, so that's what I'm gonna do. Pet It Go. All right, guys, thank you so much. Again, thank you so much, especially to everyone, especially Landrew. Okay. I mean, I think Hamas should stop firing rockets because they aren't not because they aren't justified, but because these are grown men letting children die in Gaza without any chance of advancing the Palestinian objectives. I mean, you could easily argue it's not wise strategically. I think, though, that that shouldn't be the focus of our discussion. And, what else? Seeker Mel, thank you so much. One second, who is that from? Yeah, I think that's it, right? It is true. Finkelstein said, if you don't have them, nobody cares. There are people there. Actually, you know who said that? For real. Is B'Tselem. Remember Haggai? He wrote that piece where, thank you. He wrote that piece about that in the Washington Post, which I read with Norm when Norm was on. And in fact, I made a clip out of it. So yeah. Yeah, thank you, Save Sharek. And thank you again, Seeker Mel. And thank you, official video, YouTube. Yeah. All right. So yeah, I think I'll see you guys soon. Again, as I said, I'm adding these extra streams because what is this? Enable Katie via Patreon as well. Like and subscribe. Yeah, enable me. Please I need some enablers. Just kidding. I do appreciate that. Some really weird analogies in there. Okay, so I'll see you guys later. Make sure you check on the stream so that you make sure you check, subscribe. Okay. Yeah, the 2-state isn't going to happen. All right. Bye, everyone.